Thank you for joining us this evening. Welcome to the Vale of White Horse District Council Scrutiny meeting. My name is Catherine Foxhall. I'm the co-chair of this committee, and I'm chairing this evening. And my deputy chair is Councillor Judy Roberts on my right. In terms of our officers, we are supported by Candida Basilio from Democratic Services, and we have Adriana Partridge, who's Deputy Chief Executive for Transformation and Operations and our Scrutiny Lead on the Council. So thank you everybody for joining us. I'll welcome first the councillors of the committee. If you guys could just confirm if you're here in person or online, just for the purposes of the minutes.
I just add, Chair, that Councillor Cox has just sent his apologies.
Okay, perfect, thank you. So Councillor James Cox has just sent his apologies. So do you have Councillor Ron Batstone?
Here, in the room.
Councillor Oliver Forder?
Present, in the room.
Councillor Hayley Gascoigne?
Present in the room.
Councillor Debbie Hallett?
Present in the room.
Councillor Robert Madison?
Present in the room.
And do we have apologies from Councillor Pawlowski?
I haven't heard anything, sorry.
Thank you. I'd like to welcome also Cabinet members responsible for the items under discussion this evening. So item 7, the budget setting report, we have Councillor Andy Crawford, who's Cabinet member for Finance and Property, joining us.
I'm present in the room.
Item 8, we have the corporate plan. Seemingly it's a big meeting this evening. Corporate plan and Councillor Andy Forsham.
And I'm present in the room.
It's just the committee members that we need. But yeah, Cabinet member for Corporate Services Policy and Programmes. And then item 9 Beacon, we've got Councillor Helen Pigmills.
Here too.
Cabinet member for Community Health and Wellbeing. Thank you all for joining us this evening. And then other officers in the room and online, we have Simon Hewings, who's our Head of Finance, Tim Marie, who's our Head of Policy and Programmes, Corporate Plan, and then Andrew Busby, who's our Head of Development and Corporate Landlords. Thank you again, all of you, for your time. I appreciate it's a busy day after you've already had full days as well. This evening, we have one member of the public, I believe, registered to speak. And Mr. Salmons, you're online. Can you hear us okay, Mr. Salmons?
I can, yes, thanks.
You're very welcome. So to move to the agenda, item 1, apologies for absence. We've heard Councillor James Cox. Item 2, chair's announcements. So just a tiny bit of housekeeping for those who haven't been in this room before. I think everybody's pretty familiar with it. But we have the disabled toilet in the open space available for use. Fire exit is out of the door, turn right down the corridor, and I don't believe we have any plans for fire alarm tests or anything like that. One announcement really from the chair, as set out in the Constitution as Chair of Scrutiny over the last couple of weeks, I've been consulted about fees and charges for the 2024-5 budget by the heads of service for planning, for housing and environment, Beacon, and development and corporate landlords. So thank you to the officers involved for sharing those. And we've had some comments that we've passed back. I don't intend to have any discussion about those. It's just to note that within the terms of the Constitution that we've been consulted. So about this a bit more about this meeting then. This is a meeting in public, not a public meeting, but it is being broadcast and recorded, broadcast live and recorded. So for everybody in the room, if we could just please be aware that the cameras and microphones are very sensitive, and please be aware any rustling or muttering to your neighbour does tend to get picked up by the microphones and the cameras. Committee members, please don't use your phones unless that's where the committee papers are for you. And please do take it in turns, raise your hand, and Judy and I and officers will make sure we get to everybody and everybody's got their questions. So this evening we have 3 substantial items for discussion. We have the budget setting report, corporate plan themes consultation, and the future of the Beacon report. My plan is to do the items on budget setting and corporate plan, and then to have a comfort break for a few minutes. But between each item, we've got time for officers and cabinet members to move around anyway. For each item, we will have questions, then we'll move to a debate, and then we will formulate our recommendations in each case. We do have a busy agenda, so please do keep questions short and to the point. Avoid asking about specific individual cases, and particularly if we're talking about the budget, perhaps more generalised questions rather than individual lines. If the committee feel that confidential items need discussing, and there were a couple of confidential reports alongside our beacon papers, the committee can vote to go into a confidential session at the end of the agenda, and you'll see that on the agenda as item 10, but that will be for the committee to decide during that beacon discussion. Do we have any declarations from committee members related to tonight's agenda? That's disclosable pecuniary interests, other registrable interests, or conflicts of interest? No. Thank you very much. So the first item on our agenda that we need to do some action on, item 4, is to look at the minutes from the 2 previous scrutiny meetings. And the reason we have 2 is that the 5th of December meeting was more of an informal meeting for information, and that was with NHS Bath, North East Somerset, Swindon and Wiltshire Integrated Care Board. So the first minutes we have to confirm then are from the 2nd of November Vale scrutiny meeting, and that was where we discussed the financial outturn, planning enforcement report, and our consultation and engagement report. Do any members of the committee have any comments or corrections for those minutes? Councillor Forder.
I'm not at the right time. I was wondering if there's an update on item 4, the creation of a tracker or some sort of way of monitoring how our recommendations were received and acted upon by Cabinet.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Forder. Yes, I can mention that now, or I can do it when we look at the work schedule.
Whichever you prefer, Chair.
I'll mention it when we talk about work plan. Any comments on the 2nd of November minutes? Everybody happy for me to sign those ones? Can I have a proposer and a seconder? Councillor Roberts, Councillor Forder seconding. Thank you. The minutes from the 5th of December, for those of us who were present, that was the meeting with the Integrated Care Board. Are you happy with those minutes as recorded? Yeah. So Rob and Councillor Gascoigne, thank you. Okay, item 5, our work plan. You'll see attached to the agenda, we do have our ongoing work plan for the scrutiny council.
Public participation.
Am I on the? Have I got my items the wrong way around?
Public participation.
I am terribly sorry. I had public participation down as 6, not 5. So public item 5. Thank you, Councillor Forder, for pulling me up on that one. Item 5, public participation. So this is where we have an opportunity to receive any questions or statements from members of the public that have registered to speak. Mr. John Salmons has let us know that he would like to speak on item 7, budget setting. So, Mr. Salmons, I'd like to give you 3 minutes, please, to address the committee. Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening, councillors. It'll be no surprise to some of you what I wanted to comment on this evening. Agenda item 7, the budget. Appendix D3 sets out the capital growth bids, including a proposal for further spend on a new grounds maintenance hub. It's quite confusing, but if I've understood correctly, this proposed spend is on top of the amount budgeted last year and would bring the total proposed spend on this scheme across South and Vale to some £330,000. That is not an insignificant amount of money. It is certainly an amount which warrants your scrutiny. But on the other hand, if you consider what this scheme entails, the creation of a new permanent hub for the grounds maintenance service across the 2 districts, it doesn't seem like much money at all. Last year, when the budget for the scheme was £200,000, it was clear to see the corners that had been cut. Rather than buying or renting an appropriate industrial site, the proposal was to dump this depot in a residential neighbourhood, Great Western Park in Didcot, in place of a wildflower meadow residents were promised when they purchased their homes. And I can't help but notice that over a year after that scandal came to light, despite countless opportunities, neither officers nor councillors will reassure the residents of Great Western Park that their green space is no longer under threat by this scheme. Despite the latest efforts in the paper before you this evening to present this as a nursery for growing plants and trees, just the other week an internal audit report on the grounds maintenance service set out what a council grounds maintenance hub really looks like. It's identified a shocking list of health and safety issues with the council's current depot, involving fuel, chemicals and other hazards. That is the reality of a grounds maintenance hub. It is and always will be an industrial use which belongs on an industrial estate a long way away from people's homes. Location is everything when it comes to this scheme, and yet this year the budget is silent on where the hub is proposed to be located. Councillors are presumably expected not to ask any questions whilst allocating budget for this mysterious scheme to develop an undisclosed site. But instead of turning a blind eye, I would urge this committee to ask perfectly reasonable questions of the head of development and corporate landlord who is seeking this additional budget. Questions like, what is the plan? Where will this hub be located? And if a decision hasn't been made on the location, how can you possibly know how much budget is required? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Salmons, for your statement. Please, can I ask you would send Candida Basilio a written copy of the statement, and then we can ensure that officers get back to you with a written response.
Yep, that's fine.
Lovely. Thank you ever so much. We'll move on now to item 6, which is our work plan. So you'll see on the work plan, this is the joint scrutiny and also the Vale scrutiny items going forward. Committee members, you are always welcome, and is indeed our wider members of the council, to propose items to add to that work plan. Councillor Border has already asked about an item that we or a discussion that we had last time regarding a scrutiny tracker, and the answer is that we've talked about that amongst officers. It has been mentioned also to cabinet members and the leader, and we are going to talk to officers who are involved in kind of cabinet papers to work out the most effective and efficient way that we can ensure we have feedback from the cabinet as to how our recommendations have been taken on board, which I think is the kind of key thing we're interested in, really. And it may be as simple as taking lines out of cabinet minutes. So yes, that work is definitely underway.
Thank you, Chair. No doubt your comments will be minuted, so that will remind us to follow that up in the future.
Yes, it's something we've been discussing in our chairs meetings with officers. So I hope that we will be able to action that by the next meeting, and hopefully have it as a standing item on our agenda going forward from the next May meeting.
Thank you very much.
That's my plan. Thank you. Are there any other questions on the work plan, the work schedule now? Councillor Gascoigne.
We have items to suggest. Do you want us to suggest them now or send them to you?
You're very welcome to suggest them now,
Okay.
if you like.
The Salmons has come quite a few times to quite a number of meetings I've been to about this item, and I'm actually the board member in question. So I would propose, I don't know whether it's appropriate to have that specific item as something we scrutinise when plans are more forthcoming, or as a wider, facilities that we aim to build in the next few years. However, that is best appropriate. But I do think that when we have items such as this, clearly has a lot of public interest, it is appropriate that they come to the scrutiny committee. I mean, with you being chair, at what point is appropriate, as you see fit, really. And then the other item, sort of related, but as we were looking at the beacon in this agenda, I was thinking about the other facilities that we run, such as some of our community centres, and the kind of operating models they have. Just suggestions for you to take forward.
No, that's really helpful. Thank you, Councillor Gascoigne. Certainly, to come to your second suggestion first, certainly community centres and our other facilities is something that, certainly having looked at the beacon discussion, is something, and I know Councillor Roberts is also particularly interested in that item as well. So yes, let's certainly work out a way with officers to bring that one forward. In terms of the grounds maintenance and facilities, thank you as ward member for bringing that as well. I think you're right. I think it's really important that we show that we are responding when residents do bring concerns to us, as you said, Mr. Salmons has done. So there's different ways of looking at things as scrutiny. We can look at it formally within a meeting. We can also do things like set up task and finish groups. So why don't you and I take this forward and try and work out, perhaps in discussion with Andrew Busby, what the best way might be. My understanding is that this is a joint project,
Yes.
so it may be something that we need to take to joint scrutiny as opposed to Vale scrutiny.
Yeah.
But as it's in your ward, perhaps, so that'll be something where let's discuss that. So if we could minute that, we will take that forward as an action.
Thank you.
And find a way to bring that to scrutiny in whatever form is most appropriate.
We were going to be looking at a follow-up meeting at joint scrutiny for the grounds maintenance, because I don't think we were terribly happy with the reports.
Okay. Well, let's
so
let's take that. Sorry. When I said you will obviously be included in it.
So clearly, if that's going to be happening, it would be sensible to put it together in a package.
Perfect. Thank you.
Chair, actually, funny enough, the point I was going to make was just sort of came out just then. I'm not clear about what we can ask for in the Vale Scrutiny Committee as a joint scrutiny committee, and I wonder whether there's any clarification that can be given. And there are obviously a large number of issues which are common, but also of interest to us. And really, I'd like some guidance on the proper method of taking these things forward and to which committee.
Certainly, I mean, I would just say I've always found, particularly Adriana and Candida, a font of knowledge in terms of just helping us work through ideas and which things should go where. And particularly, there's been a couple of things that have come out, discussions from joint scrutiny, that we've actually said, no, they would be better looked at individually. So yeah, absolutely. So I think it depends on the topic. Bring a topic, and then we'll work out the best form. And it may be that it is a joint topic, but that as Vale, we think it's particularly important and we want to talk about it, in which case we can bring it to our committee.
Well, I suppose that's also the point, because obviously if one sits on one committee but not the other, the point is obvious, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you very much. And of course, as ward members, you would always be welcome to come and speak to whichever committee is meeting. Councillor Halley.
Thank you. Mine was related to that. I had it here on my list too. Maybe we could look at whether joint scrutiny is actually providing enough investigation into the issues of the bill, and if we're satisfied with how that's working for our residents as it's set up currently.
I would say so. As members of the committee, we've all been involved. We've all had interviews recently, and the councillors are both working with the Centre for Governance and Scrutiny.
Well, we didn't all have interviews.
Okay.
Some of us did not participate.
Okay.
So their findings will address something like that?
Okay. Yeah, yes, absolutely. We will be looking, we will have a whole kind of scrutiny review. And we are expecting, I think, their report to come back hopefully in March. And that certainly I would anticipate some good discussions following that, as to what we can do and where we can look and what we can ask for.
Yeah, I look forward to that. I was not part of that investigation.
I'm sorry you weren't. I think maybe it was due to the timing of the change of committee membership. Okay.
Thank you.
Right, I'm really conscious we have a super busy evening. Thank you, everybody else. Obviously, anytime you want to propose anything, do get in touch with Councillor Roberts and I, and we will see what we can do.
Chair, may I interrupt and say,
yes,
Councillor Pawlowski's joining us online. If you could announce him.
Good evening, Councillor Pawlowski. Thank you for joining us online. Can you hear us? Okay.
Yeah, all good, thank you.
All right, just to clarify, you'll be able to be involved in discussion, but you wouldn't be able to participate in any vote or decision, I think. Is that correct?
Correct, yeah.
Okay, lovely. So to move then to our first substantial item of the evening, our budget setting report. So we've got Cabinet Member Councillor Andrew Crawford here to introduce the report. Thank you ever so much for joining us. And with him, Simon Hewings, who's our Head of Finance. And I should really emphasise that our discussion is about the process of the budget setting, as much as it is about individual lines of the budget, which possibly might be as appropriately brought to full council. So there's other opportunities to discuss the budget. So our interest here is the report about the budget setting process. And thank you both for all of your work thus far. So Councillor Crawford, if I could ask you to introduce the report, please.
Yes. So you just had a presentation, haven't you, councillors, which has gone into great detail about how the budget is put together. I don't really want to spend too much time in introducing it. I'd rather allow you to have more time in questioning it. But I'd like to thank officers for all the work they put into it, particularly Simon to my right here, who has done so with 3 principal accountants light for most of the process, and it hasn't been easy. That's a quite challenging external audit that needed to be finished, that took a lot of resources away. I apologise that it's slightly later than it we would ideally like, although there's obviously several weeks before this goes to council. There's plenty of time for it to be scrutinised and challenged up until then as well. I think I'll just happily leave it to any questions or observations that the committee would like to make.
Okay, thank you very much.
Actually, one other thing, if there's any questions that relate to contracts, I think we need to be careful, and there might be occasions that if people do ask particular questions that are verging on the commercial, I won't answer them, but you might decide you want to go into confidential session.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, so we have the budget setting report in front of us. Councillor Porter.
Yes, I wonder whether you could both help with a clarification for me, and perhaps for other members of the public and other councillors who are reading the reports. When I looked at originally, I saw this number for a base budget, and saw that increase. It was scheduled to increase between last year and the coming year from 17.3 million to 22.1 million, which would represent a 28% increase based on those numbers. Now, if you look at the net increase after certain adjustments have been made, that comes down to 21%. And that's primarily because of an increase in investment income, which to a certain extent offsets certain costs, because obviously as inflation is high and costs increase, interest rates rise, and the amount of revenue we get increases as well. Now, these numbers seem very high, and I would be concerned that we and other people would welcome an explanation of why those numbers appear at that level.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Porter. So just to stress then, line 17, which is the base budget, is a net figure. It's a net of all the income and all the expenditure. So our gross, I don't know the figure off the top of my head, but it were, for example, our gross revenue budget to be 67 million and our gross income to be 50 million. That's where the 17 million comes from. So to a certain extent, using that calculation to analyse the percentage increases is because of the way it's laid out. I think you're not actually comparing apples with pears. So I think we discussed this earlier on. It would be quite helpful if in the report for next year we clarified that of what the gross amounts are that lead to the net amount that is in line 17 of Appendix 7 leading to a financial plan. And I suppose the other observation is you're quite right. Any extra treasury income we get is a function of current interest rates, which are often mirrored by inflation. Obviously, the downside is that whilst interest rates might go down, which is what we're expecting in the future, we don't then decrease the inflationary effects that have already happened. And that is a big challenge for the capital organisations, particularly this council faces.
Chair, the mysteries of public finance are ones that are known to very few, and certainly the reporting thereof. But I just wonder whether we could make a recommendation to Cabinet for some slightly further explanation next year to make it clear so that it's clear that any increases can be applied to total amounts rather than net amounts.
Thank you, Councillor Porter. Yes, let's come back to that when we formulate our recommendations later. if you could come back with that one, that would be really helpful.
If I can remember it, Chairman, I shall do so.
I've written it down as well.
Thank you.
I shall prompt. Thank you, Councillor Porter. Other questions from our committee members?
I've just got one more, then I promise to shut up. Are we only looking at the budget setting or the MTFP tonight, or not?
Well, the MTFP has been included within our papers, so yes, it's within scope, definitely.
I just wanted to ask a question again about some of the assumptions used in the creation of the MTFP. Now, forecasting income and expenditure is a very, very difficult process. And the one thing I think everyone here knows is that whatever forecasts are made will not turn out to be exactly true as fact. However, it's probably true, although there are large items that are uncertain, that it is much easier to forecast expenditure for a local council than it is revenue matters at the moment, because they're so dependent on the whims and policies of government, which change year by year, and no doubt will be substantially changed if and when a new administration comes to take its place. However, I just wanted to ask whether I don't remember his first name, the cabinet member present, thinks the revenue forecasts could be in some circumstances over conservative, because they assume not only maintenance of core grants from government at no increase, but also the deletion of certain discretionary grants as well.
My daughter gave me this device before we came. It's a crystal ball that allows me to work out what's going to happen in the future. It doesn't actually seem to be functioning. So I'm going to take it back to her. Are we too conservative? I think is the question about our projections. I think if you go to the medium-term financial plan, what we've actually done at the bottom is that we've put in a less conservative and a more conservative option, actually, because below the line, we also talk about what will happen if funding goes down. It's really difficult, Councillor Ford, isn't it, to know what on earth's going to happen. We don't even know, which government's going to be in place in a few months' time and what our funding is likely to be. We don't know where interest rates are going. We don't know how many planning applications we're going to have. We can simply work out our best estimates based on the professional knowledge of our officers and on historic trends, and on experts who tell us that interest rates, for example, are likely to fall to X% in 12 months' time. What we do know, though, is that there are 4 very large contracts coming up for renewal in the next 2 or 3 years. Sabah car parks, GLL leisure, 5 councils partnership, and most of all the waste recycling contract. All of those are big ticket items, and it is extremely difficult at this point until we've done a lot more work to know what the market's likely to be in all those. There's certainly a fear in my mind that at least a couple of those could end up, costing us more. Maybe some will cost us less. It's extremely difficult to forecast that. And I think the view that officers have taken, and I agree with them, is to assume that the costs will remain as they are at the moment through the 5 years of the medium-term financial plan. But we have to accept that things might go up and down significantly, depending on what happens when contracts, for example, are retendered.
Chair, in terms of thank you very much. In terms of analysing and scrutinising these numbers from our point of view, I think that it would be very helpful to have some sensitivity analyses showing what the situation would be under various scenarios. Would that be possible? And obviously, I think members would understand if that were possible, that could be made available in private session, because I think sometimes otherwise it can get very confusing.
I guess one of the problems with that is there are so many variables on there that are out there that you might want to be modelled in the sensitivity analysis. I'll defer to Simon as to whether it's feasible. But what I would say, I guess, is that I wouldn't want us to commit to modelling all variables, but if he's able to, just those ones that are most likely to be most significant financially.
Otherwise, modelling all the changes in all variables will be a never-ending task, right? Literally. So I certainly, but that wouldn't be my suggestion.
I think it's something we can certainly consider for next year's budget setting report, because there's one forecast in here, or there's one scenario, and well, there's two scenarios actually, isn't there? There's one that's in the MTFP, is the working assumption. There's a second one at the bottom. We can certainly, for future presentations of the budget, consider alternatives. I mean, hopefully we won't have that many scenarios to be thinking through in 12 months' time, fingers crossed. But yeah, we'll certainly take that away.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, everybody. Councillor Hallett.
Thank you. I'm looking at Appendix D2 because that's where I find the fun stuff. This is the capital program and the details thereof. And I wondered if you could help me understand the local authority housing fund. And we've had this year a large amount budgeted to that, and then nothing now for the next 5 years. So I'm assuming from this it's been discontinued or spent out. Or
This is our contribution to the purchase of properties, which were 50% funded by the government.
so these are the ones that are for the Ukraine.
Yeah. I think we've currently purchased 18 or 19 properties.
Okay.
And there's still some money left in some properties that I think we're bidding for or are still looking to buy.
Okay.
Once those properties are bought, then obviously there's no need for a capital sum to be spent on.
Thank you very much.
Services, unless of course any future government decides to reinstigate another scheme and offer us this choice, which is actually a good choice. And you spend 50% of the money and you get 100% of the property.
Yeah.
In perpetuity. So that will only change if there's an additional scheme of that nature.
Thanks.
Thank you very much. Councillor Pawlowski online.
Thank you very much. And yeah, I mean, Simon and his team do an amazing job, having seen this sitting in cabinet. But I have a question, Councillor Crawford, around Appendix A3, which is the inflation and salary changes. So there's quite a jump between 2024-25 and 25-26. Apologies if this was covered in the briefing earlier, but I'm currently at home with the flu. Just wondering, is that a leap in additional cost because of sort of baseline inflation stroke? I know obviously there's been an increase with regards to national insurance, or is that indicating a jump in recruitment? Could you possibly explain?
I certainly can, and may I say you sound awful, Sally.
Thank you very much. If only I'd had your daughter's crystal ball, Andy.
It's not working. I wish you a speedy recovery. So the 936,000, for example, is entirely inflation based on an assumption of 6.5% pay settlement for staff this coming year. But the spending profile is cumulative. So that 936,000, for example, is Right, so 6.5 this year,
Yeah.
and then 3% the following year, and then
Okay.
2.5% the following year. Year after
All right.
that.
So that's where it drops down. Okay. So
Yeah.
the joys of inflation still. All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Pawlowski. I'd like to ask you, please, about the base budget challenge exercise that you did with various different services. You talk about this as an Ofsted-based challenge. You talk about the focus on the key areas, but there's not really much in the report about the outcomes of that challenge exercise. So I was just hoping if you could please explain a bit more about how that exercise, how the services were chosen, what that exercise entailed, and most importantly, what the results were, what the outcomes were, and what's changed as a result of those exercises.
How long have you got? So the three areas that were chosen were those ones that were deemed to be the most significant financially, and the ones that were likely to have the most changes and challenges in them. So, for example, it would have been foolish for us to ignore an area that included the renewal of the waste contract. And they all said those three areas are actually the biggest areas within the council as far as items that we have control over. The process is basically we go through each individual service area and each individual cost code, each budget code, so every little tiny service that you can imagine. We're provided with details of everything that makes up that revenue line, sorry, that expenditure line. We look at all the proposed essential growth items, or what we are told are essential growth items, well, ones that might be discretionary, and determine whether or not there can be savings to be made, or whether there's actually additional income that can be raised. And obviously, those individual budget areas are. I'll use a bad example. You know, we have a budget code for street naming. I think it's £10,000 or something, and it comprises of half a dozen little items or different types of expenditure. But for that wasn't part of the challenge, but that's an example. So really, it's members, and when I say members, each relevant cabinet member for that particular service area or budget code, together with I and the officers and Simon, and normally one of the deputy chief executives was there as well. Ordinarily, Suzanne Malcolm was most of them were hers. Would really just interrogate officers. Sometimes come up with challenges about can we reduce this further? Is this a duplication? Challenges about the level of fees that are being charged. So looking at every nook and cranny really to see whether we were happy with the suggestions that officers were coming forward, and also putting our ideas in about things that we didn't want to be spent on, or we did. That's not. I'm not going to go through line by line.
No, sure.
Lines, but I'll happily answer any specific questions if they're important.
And did you feel that process was effective? You felt that did you feel that there were significant outcomes and gains from that process?
I think there were. I think it was sensible to focus on those three major areas, because sometimes we try and do too much, particularly in areas that are stable and not changing. You just wasting your time doing it for the sake of it. I guess it's true that we've got quite a few new cabinet members for whom this was the first experience of this process, and it was important that therefore they did it, and also I was there because I've done it before, and I probably understand their budgets almost as well as they do, and sometimes better than that. And it forces officers to justify to us why we are spending council taxpayers' money on this service, and on this, what we're sitting around and like that.
Thank you.
So yeah, it's valuable. It can always be improved. But I think it was a good process. I would prefer it to have happened a little bit earlier than it did. But it's a good reason why I didn't.
Lovely. Thank you very much. Councillor Gascoigne.
Yep. So Appendix A4 is items of essential growth, and you explained to me what essential growth means, which was helpful. But I was wondering, these items that exist here, are they, because we've had to add those in, and they're like, we have to do these. How many can sort of be foreseen, basically? Like, will there be a bunch more of these next year, and then they keep sort of adding in, or some of these, like, you know, we knew they were going to happen? Because that will obviously add to our budget in the future.
The idea is that this captures everything that we know about, and what officers have been asked to do is to effectively say this will be everything. So we're not expecting any significant additional essential growth items in the future. And where they do happen and they're not matched by additional income, then we're going to have to potentially face making savings elsewhere.
Mm-hmm.
Now, clearly, if the government comes up with a new grant of money to provide a particular service, there will be essential growth both in income and in expenditure to deliver that.
Yeah.
But other than that, I would be disappointed if there's anything significantly that comes forward as part of the essential growth. Subject, of course, to this is being partly developed in the light of the emerging corporate plan.
Yeah.
You know, it's not inconceivable that there would be major changes to the corporate plan that would require the budget to change. I would hope not.
So is there an exercise done, or do you have it on like a spreadsheet somewhere or a document that says, you know, this year we thought the essential growth items were this, and then when it came to the future year, we ended up adding X number of items. Like, how accurate are you in your predictions? I understand the stuff that comes up that you can't help, but just, yeah.
How accurate are we in our predictions? I would say that certainly the majority of these will be accurate in as much as, you know, for example, where we're adding an additional post for a particular reason, we know what the post is going to cost us. So it will be clear, and to a certain extent, many of those relate to that. Others, for example, reduction in planning fees, which is part of your essential growth because it's a negative income movement, is very much the best efforts that we have based on what we expect the market to do. And so effectively we're right sizing last year's budget. So officers have been asked to be as realistic as they possibly can. Is it inconceivable that, you know, the bottom falls out of the property market and houses aren't built and therefore planning fees aren't received and we have to reassess? It's feasible, yeah. But I think on the whole we've done a reasonably good job. If you look at the prior years actuals against budget, the budget outturn reports, although there tends to be some movement in individual lines, the overall picture has generally been reasonably close to what we predicted. During COVID years, obviously things were very different because that was a major challenge, and revenue certainly fell below in a number of areas. And again, interest rates, I guess, the other thing that is really outside of our control. I think we're budgeting over £5 million worth of treasury income this coming year. I think last year we budgeted probably less than 1 million, didn't we, Simon? So yeah, it's a nice to have.
Okay, thank you.
Tends to remind me, if I may say so, between that statement, I can't remember who it was, about known knowns, known unknowns, and unknown unknowns, and it's the unknown unknowns that get you in the end, isn't it?
Yeah.
Councillor Robert.
On page 19, the salary increments have stayed the same right across all 5 years. And I'm wondering, with the 5 council partnership coming to an end in 25, whether we're hoping to grow our own expertise back into the budget, or are we just hiring people and hanging on. And also, I was looking at the transformational team. That's the same cost all the way through 5 years. And I'm wondering, does that mean that we're, again, keeping the same transformation team, looking at transforming the council on an ongoing basis?
So the salary increments increase. So it doesn't say the
Page
same.
19,
On
it's
page
not the
19.
salary increases. That's not the other thing.
So I'm looking at page 19, and the salary increments do go up each year.
Yeah, page 19. That was just down the other end.
Unless I misunderstand.
Is it cumulative or?
Yeah, salary increments going across. And that's a rolling budgetary increase, is it not?
Yeah, so
They're additive.
so the same answer
So they're
related to
effectively
salary.
the same levels of
The
salary.
101 forms part of the 206. In other words, it goes up 101 this coming year, 105 the next year. Yeah.
It's just an ongoing rolling of the same amount, isn't it? Is that salary
Roughly.
increments as in
People moving up the band.
moving up a band?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's why that doesn't really indicate that we're trying to increase growing our own with the contract coming to an end, because
Well, not here, it doesn't, no. But in the essential growth, there are some posts that
I was wondering.
we are
So
creating.
if we are there, so why doesn't it show up in there? That was my
I'm
thing.
missing-
Further on, it
missing
says
your-
you're going to
missing
do
your
that, and then
question,
there
really.
it says you're not doing it. So I was confused.
I still haven't got the gist of the question. I'm sorry.
Well, further on, it says that we are going to be growing our own team. Well, we're putting certain things in to cope with the fact that the 5CP will be bringing more people back in-house as the contract comes to an end. I'm guessing for this to be true, for the same incremental amount every year, when you're presumably growing your staff, means you're having less people going up a band. And I would be surprised at that if you're going to be trying to increase the knowledge within the company.
Okay,
To
so
cover the
I think I got most of the answer, but Simon might have to help me out.
I was hoping to see it go up.
So these salary increments, I think, are for existing staff. You're right that when contracts come to an end, it might be that some services will be insourced. It's not inconceivable. But for the purposes of the budget, we've assumed that the costs for any service that we don't know how it's going to change will remain the same. Is that just, Simon maybe want to explain that in a more erudite way than I do?
I was just going to make a couple of points. I mean, the increments figure for 24-25 is exactly as Andy's just said. It's based on this year's salary budget, and it's the value of the increments paid to staff. For future years, we just roll that figure forward as a proxy, because we don't actually know, because there will be people in that number who will reach the top of grade with that increment. So if nothing else changed, it won't be that number next year, because we might get new people coming in who are getting who replace someone who's been top of grade for years. Or some of the other people on here will get to top of grade and never get an increment again until they, whilst they're employed by us. So we can only ever take a number as a proxy. In terms of the essential growth, there are essential growth items for specific staff to facilitate some of the work associated with the contract renewals we've got coming up. But some of those staff are only one-off, some are ongoing. The cost of staff, or the cost of the contracts, of course, is carried on in the base. So as we alluded to earlier on, we're not making any allowance for those costs to go up or down at this stage. We'll have a better idea when we know what the future of those services is.
In which case I shall ask my follow-up question, which is the sort of curveball one. We've always done a 5-year MTFP. My understanding is we don't actually need to do a 5-year. We could do a 3-year. And I'm beginning to wonder, given so many changes and so much difficulty in predicting anywhere beyond 3 years, what the justification for continuing to do 5-year MTFP is. MTFP.
It might not be a legal requirement, but I think it's considered to be best practice, isn't it? I'm not sure it's actually a formal SIPA requirement, is it?
I'm sure it's even.
I'd have to double check, but it certainly is a minimum best practice. Most councils do 5 years. Some councils actually go beyond 5 years and do longer. I wouldn't be comfortable doing less than 5 years. I think if you do less than 5 years, I imagine councils that are struggling financially possibly didn't have a 5-year MTFP, that told them what they had to worry about in future.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it is very. Don't get me wrong, it is very difficult to do. It is always difficult to do a 5-year MTFP. Government funding for one thing, I think we're in very much a state of flux at the moment. But I think the key thing for me this year is the MTFP is probably giving us the way it's presented now is giving us a target we've got to live within, and I think it's going to be potentially challenging to live within that. I don't know, might not be, but I think it's giving us a target we have to live within, and I think that's the challenge. If we go back to Councillor Gascoigne's point earlier on about essential growth, whatever the number of the essential growth is, that in future years we will have to come back to that budget line.
So that's why I'm wondering, it does say in the narrative, in the past this has been a more predictable operation, but given the number of changes and also the fact that we're likely to have a government change of some sort in this period of time, predicting anything like 3 to 5 years has been even more of a estimate.
You're quite right, but I guess apart from anything else, with a 4-year term of administration, I'm not sure I'd be very comfortable in only having a 3 years and not knowing what my final year of the administration is going to be. And I think most councils in control would think that they'd like to see at least the full picture of their term plus one. However, obviously understanding that the further out you go, the less certainty there is.
Thank you. Okay. Last question from Councillor Gascoigne, and then I'll move us to discussion and recommendation.
Yeah, okay. So, Chair, Councillor Botwell said we're talking today about the budget setting, so it's not to talk about specific line items, but this public speaker asked about grounds maintenance. So maybe to keep it more of a general question, and hopefully, as I talked about, something we can bring to a future scrutiny meeting separately, but to bring it to the budget setting, I asked, how does it come? At what point would a plan have to be at for you to say we're going to spend this much money? Clearly, you have to allocate it if you think it's going to happen. But see, the public speaker thought that this perhaps is insinuating that we have some kind of project plan that's about to be implemented, hence why we have a budget. But obviously, as we talked about setting a budget, you have to set a budget even when you don't know exactly what's going to happen. So I don't know, perhaps you could talk around where this figure comes from in this case, or projects like it.
Well, my understanding is it's based on the expected cost of a grounds maintenance depot, and it isn't location specific.
Yeah.
So do you want, maybe Simon can add to that, but it's certainly not. It's not the case, as far as I know, that we have a location that identifies itself with this budget.
That's my understanding. But you're right, we have to make an allocation. Because
otherwise you can't do it.
Yeah.
Thank you both very much. If I move us to, is there any general debate or general discussion amongst the committee that you'd like to have without directing specific questions to the cabinet member? Or would we like to think about our recommendations? Or if you're happy, or if you'd rather, if anyone's got any more burning questions, we could, if there's no debate, we could probably take another couple of questions.
Yeah, I had something, but it might not be, it's not maybe aimed at our guests here. Because some of the things we've been talking about today is when we present this paper, what does it mean to the person that's reading it? And obviously you've kind of explained it to us as someone who doesn't usually deal with this kind of thing. It's been helpful. So I was wondering, it might not be able to be answered. What gets presented to the public? Obviously these papers are public, but I know that in some cases when we have things for the public, we have comms do something to get a message out, maybe some graphics, some headlines, that sort of thing. So not just a press release, but I'm thinking of the plans that the corporate plan, the quarterly reports we have, they're quite nicely presented. Is there a plan to have anything similar for this?
Budget comms.
Mm.
Funnily enough, I had that very conversation with Simon just before the meeting about comms. Clearly, at the moment, the budget hasn't been approved by cabinet and by council. But nonetheless, we have to assume that we know that a budget will be set, and hopefully it's substantial in this budget. And so the conversation I had with Simon was really we need to start working now on making sure that we've got the comms going out. And Simon said, well, he's actually already started that process. So yes, we do. And you're quite right that we need to couch the comms in a term that people who don't understand the minutiae of CITFA and local authority accounting can actually get to grips with. So yeah, that is the plan.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's a really good question, because actually OCC have done a comms thing recently where they've basically said, we've got to find £11 million. Can you help us do it? And they have a thing where you can kind of mess around with the budgets and try. And I think that's really helpful for the public, because it does help them understand, actually, this is not easy. And I think it does help get the comms. It's like a starter for the bad news that's coming. I do think I found that quite interesting.
Can I respond to that? So my understanding is that there's a legal requirement on council where they are making service cuts.
Right.
But they have to consult with the public. Good news about this budget, there are no service cuts. That's not to say that there shouldn't be, good communication, but because we don't have to consult on budget cuts, and because the county do, that's why they went through that process, which I don't think they've done necessarily in North Rhine.
Okay, thank you.
I think it occurred to me before I joined the council. Well, the first year we looked at the budget, people on the doorstep will say, "Oh, my council tax has so much money," but what we have seen from looking at budgets over the few years is that only makes up quite a small part of.
So I've already seen the document that will go out with the council tax.
Okay.
Which is very different from previous years, and I think it will answer that very question. I don't want to announce the BAFTA winners just yet, but comms have done an excellent job in describing where people's money goes, which wasn't necessarily totally clear in the rather stodgy way that it's put out in the pots. And look, you should look forward to it.
I will.
You can tell me what you think about it afterwards.
Councillor Pawlowski.
Yeah, I was just going to say something similar. Obviously, the county has launched a budget simulator, but it's nothing to do with cuts. I think it's to get people to get their heads around how the budgets are set, and obviously how there's very little margin to move around. But I agree, when it comes to the budget, public comms are key, because understanding the different segments and that reality that everyone lumps it in under the council, when obviously we're actually quite a small proportion, and compared to the police crime commissioner who can just whack his up by a percentage without a referendum. But that's for another meeting, I suppose.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah. But I do think it's really important, more than ever, to get that delineation across around the difference between the county, which is a really big chunk, and what we have left with at the district, and hopefully that comes across somehow in the communications. It'd be interesting, Councillor Crawford, to have a look, maybe just to ask at county how many people actually engaged with the budget simulator. I have to say I had a go and I got quite frustrated with it, and I'm not exactly a technophobe, but whether it actually promoted more engagement for people to understand what the cost implications are within a budget. And obviously they have a much bigger pot to play with than we do, but I think it'd be interesting to see, because I think post-COVID, engagement with any of these exercises is becoming smaller and smaller. And obviously I know we've got the corporate plan to discuss next, but it'd be really interesting to see what we could do to go forwards, if anything, because you're presenting, as you have done ever since your administration took on, a balanced budget, which is extremely favourable compared to many other councils. And I think getting that across to the general membership, and residents around the trust in budget and what we do have to play with, I think is key, because I just think there's a lot of apathy out there, if you know what I mean. And who can blame them, right? There's when faced with what government's telling people, then it's not exactly a pretty picture, is it? So, I just wonder if there's a way of being able to communicate in that wider term, and it'd be interesting to see what is coming through in our dreaded March letters that fall on our doorsteps.
I mean, it would certainly be interesting to see what the experience of the county was in their initiative this year and how many people engaged. As I said to you, I think we are communicating council tax increase or council tax changes very differently this year, and hopefully that'll be better. But also we need to think about how we issue our press releases and in which media we release our comms about this as well, so that it can get to as many people in an understandable way as possible.
Thank you, Councillor Pawlowski. Right, I'm going to move us to recommendations now.
I wanted to make a very quick comment. Following up on that, very quick. All that data is in the performance scrutiny paper that went to Cabinet at County, so that's all public. But we used to consult on the budget, and we don't anymore. And one of the things I learned from the amount of people who responded to the budget simulator is that it was a very effective way of communicating with the public. And I think since we've stopped consulting on the budget prior to the budget setting, we may have lost some form of communication about what services the districts actually control versus other councils and other people. And so I just wanted to kind of throw in, should we go back to consulting on our budget before we get to the latter stages?
Okay, so I think we have some recommendation possibly around comms and consultation. Let's move to, we've got a lot to get through this evening. Let's move to recommendations. So we have Councillor Forder's initial discussion, which was around including the gross amounts to help understanding what this base budget is in the context of the larger budget, the full amounts of money that come in and go out. Is that correct?
Yes, that's right. And I think in the narrative, to have a sort of a fuller explanation of what the base budget was, so there's a possible, it's easier to see, the percentage increases rather than just the full increases. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Other recommendations that have come out of the discussion this evening? Councillor Watson.
It comes from my question earlier on that in Appendix D1, we related our capital expenditure to the corporate plans themes, which, and I see in D2, and I'm very interested in this, that each item is related to one of our corporate plan themes. And I would just suggest that we highlight that, because I think that's a very good idea. It quite easily is relating our capital expenditure back to our corporate plan in a fairly easily digestible form. And I think we ought to somehow put that into the comms.
Right. Do we have a specific recommendation for Cabinet that they can take away?
I'm not sure. I just discovered this first column in Appendix D2, which I found really useful, which is just the number from 1 to 5.
Of the corporate plan
of the report, saying where this is going. And I think somehow there might be a way of highlighting that.
I wonder if perhaps then...
It almost comes back to the corporate plan discussion as well.
Yeah, we may come back to it later, but whether perhaps, we talked about these challenge exercises, maybe the recommendation would be to do a specific challenge exercise related to the new corporate plan, perhaps?
Well, I think this came out of the challenge exercise, didn't it, effectively on the capital?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so effectively, part of the capital budget challenge exercise, we gathered information on all the existing capital schemes and confirmed, and also the proposed growth ideas, and confirmed the primary corporate plan objective that was being serviced. So I suspect when we get the new corporate plan themes, we would need to revisit the existing corporate plan, capital programme, and work out which priority the schemes now primarily facilitated. But that would obviously follow by the time we get to next year's budget.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's good.
Did you, Candida is brilliant at getting our discussion into a clear motion and recommendation. So I'm just looking at you. Are there any specific other recommendations that you'd like us to take to Cabinet?
Chair, my other recommendation, which I think was acceptable, was to Councillor Crawford, was that we should have some sensitivity analyses as well, to show how the sensitivity of changes in income and expenditure.
And was that specifically related to the medium-term financial plan?
It was, yes.
So to look at the different possible scenarios?
Yes,
Yeah.
indeed.
Okay, and to communicate them.
I'm sure they're doing the first already.
Not that Scrutiny's discussed it much, but I wonder whether we should go back to consulting on the budget.
And then we have a kind of comms and consultation, and there's As I guess when you looked.
Well, we have. Well, you want to talk about recommendations, so I don't. You don't want to go back to debate on that item right now. So that was all my place. It would. I think it'd be a wider discussion than I can think up now.
Okay. Perhaps we could recommend to Cabinet that the Cabinet members for finance and communications talk about how best to communicate and at what point to communicate subjects, and leave that up to you guys to decide how best to do that.
Happy with that.
Okay. So that would be Councillor Edward. Okay, lovely. Any other recommendations? Candida, do you have a paragraph?
I don't. I haven't got that far. I've just been noting down what you've said.
Okay.
In terms of the report itself, is there anything?
Just the recommendation. So I think we're happy. We've got the sensitivity analyses.
Yeah.
We've got discussion about comms going forward, and we've got including the gross amounts.
Yeah, including gross amounts with a fuller explanation of the base budget. And then there was also the note about the links to the corporate plan and how that would be linked again when we get new themes for the corporate plan.
Okay.
Sensitivity analysis for the MTFP.
Yeah.
Sorry, what's a sensitivity analysis?
It's where you. Oh, sorry. Councillor
We're
Crawford, would you like?
we're about to recommend it. I don't even know what it is.
It allows you to model the impact of variables on particular financial positions. So, for example, the budget might say that we're expecting inflation to be 4% and interest rates to be 2% throughout the 5 years. But you might want to do an analysis of what would happen, in fact, if inflation was 10% and interest rates were 1%. So it allows you to put in more variables, or to change the likelihood of particular variables, so that you can see what the outcome would be were X, Y, or Z to happen. Combination of X, Y, and Z to happen. Does that make sense?
I'm on the verge of laughing. Why don't you just do that instead of having Scrutiny recommend something like that? I don't understand.
Well, that's our role, is to.
Well, also, I didn't realize we weren't supposed to look at line items, so I apologize for my
No,
question.
that's absolutely fine.
Absolutely a line item question.
No,
That's what I thought we were here to do.
No, that's absolutely fine. Now, what I wanted to make the distinction was that there's kind of political stuff that happens in full council about where budget is allocated, and then there's our role as a non-party political kind of scrutiny committee. That was really the point I was making.
I've of course heard of those. Those are the kind of assessments where you can just move the levers. That's really what happens.
And there's lots of levers to move.
Yeah.
It's not a document that.
So is it also something that would include a financial decision being taken that would affect different groups of people differently?
Councillor Hallett, I'm really sorry, we are going to have to move on because we've still got 2 more massive items.
Okay.
I think we can, through the year, perhaps.
So in order to support the recommendations, I was needing answers to that question.
Yes, absolutely, sure. Are you happy? You're content to?
I'm done, thanks.
All right, thank you ever so much. All right, so are we happy?
So can I just check? We've made these. You've come up with this list here of. So you've got you want include the gross amounts to help understand the base budget, so the explanation of the base budget, the links to the corporate plan, added sensitivity analysis for MTFP where possible, and you've also covered communications and consultation, cabinet members for finance and communications to decide how best to do that. But because it's a few items, who are we directing this to? Is it to the officers and the cabinet?
It was a recommendation for cabinet.
Cabinet,
please,
okay.
to take those. Obviously, then it's up for cabinet to decide what they do with those recommendations. We can't instruct them.
Sadly.
I mean, obviously, I'll go away and word it for you, as in, it's written there, but obviously I'll make it all make sense.
Perfect.
If you're happy with those ones that I've just quickly listed.
Committee, can we take a vote on if we're happy with?
Yeah, that's up. Do we need a proposal and second?
Ideally, yes.
Suppose.
Thank you. Councillor Roberts, second. Councillor Ford proposed, Councillor. Thank you ever so
all
much.
in favour then for that one, everyone.
Thank you ever so much. Thank you ever so much, Councillor Crawford. Thank you ever so much, Simon, for your time this evening and for the inordinate amount of work I'm sure that you all and your teams have put into and will continue to put into the budget. Thank you ever so much.
Thank you.
Great. So we move now to item 8, corporate plan. This is corporate plan process. And we have Councillor Andy Fulsham joining us, Cabinet Member for Corporate Services Policy and Programmes, and Tim Arouye, who is our Head of Policy and Programmes for the Council. Thank you ever so much both for joining us. Apologies for how late we're getting. Councillor Fulsham, can I invite you to introduce your report for your item, please?
Thank you, Chair. I'm delighted to be here this evening to present this to you. For one thing, it's the nearest that I'll ever get to the musician's dilemma of the tricky second album. It's a difficult one to manage. Should we just say more of the same, please? But that would show a distinct lack of an inability to learn from our experiences over the last 4 years. But all change approach would suggest that we were on the wrong course, and that's something that I would refute very firmly. So last autumn, we embarked on a process of reviewing our current corporate plan with members and senior officers, examining what worked well and what we could have done better, and gathered our hopes, plans and aspirations for the next 4 years. Took this away over Christmas and analysed them and grouped them into themes that I saw reflected the ambitions and passions of those who'd contributed to the exercise. Where people hadn't been able to attend in-person meetings, I emphasised that I was very open to submission by email. Thankfully, it soon became very clear that people had ideas centred around 3 main themes, which, as the accompanying papers show, are providing the homes that people need, supporting climate and nature recovery, and creating healthy, sustainable and inclusive communities. However, just as important as these, how we will work to deliver on our priorities. This again fell into 3 areas: by working responsibly and in partnership, supporting thriving local businesses, and building a council for the future. It's very significant that 2/3 of this talks of working in partnership with other bodies. We're not big enough to go it on our own. Well, that's so well for places like Birmingham. We will work in partnership with others, constructively, but always putting our residents' interests first. And if that means taking a firm line with anyone from big companies, other councils and national bodies, then so be it. But the final part is all about how we work as a council. As we all know, we're living through a financial crisis, as are many of our residents. Other councils have to declare effective bankruptcy through Section 114 notices. I'm proud of the way that we've stabilised our finances over the last 4 years. We're inheriting a perilous position. But we have to be cautious and avoid anything that might jeopardise our finances. So this section talks about stable finances and using the contributions from developers while striving to improve all areas of the council's operations and transform them to best fit our residents' needs as we move into the second quarter of the 21st century. And finally, I want to reassure everyone that this isn't the finished plan. We want to engage with a host of internal and external stakeholders including our officers, elected members, businesses and communities, to receive their views and check if it meets their hopes and aspirations. And the plan, when further developed, will be backed with a list of the projects that we want to achieve. So everyone's hard work in submitting ideas won't be wasted. Be checking through, and each one that I have listed naturally hangs off one or more of these themes. We're also working on a better reporting model so we can see the milestones that mark progress and monitor performance in ways that matter to our residents. The report before you therefore sets out the approach and timeline to develop our plan for Vale, introduce the draft themes, and give an indication of how we would like to engage with others during the process towards adoption at full council in the autumn. I'm delighted to present this to you, and officers and I will be happy to take your questions and comments.
Thank you, Councillor Fulsham. Colleagues, committee members, would anybody like to start with a question? Councillor Hyde.
Thank you. Thanks for this. Thanks for all the work on this. I support learning from our past experiences, as you called it, learning from our mistakes, I believe, but learning from our past experiences. I am keen on that, so keen on that. So I'm looking at paragraph 12, where you list your 3 major themes that you're proposing here.
Yeah.
I noticed that we've dropped a focus on financial responsibility and also on openness and transparency. If I recall correctly, when we consulted on the last corporate plan, those were the 2 items that were ranked by far the highest in the public concern. Fiscal responsibility and openness and transparency. So why the change of focus now?
Thank you for your comments. I actually took that very much into account in starting on these themes, but actually believe that those 2 aspects, the financial responsibility and working on stable finances and the openness and transparency, were so important. They actually underlaid all 3 elements of the plan. And that's why they're very much incorporated in how we work. I've said to colleagues, it's not just what we do, it's the way that we do it. That's key to our plan and what we want to deliver. So yes, it's clearly there. I hope that in all the communications of the plan, this will come out. But yes, there are very, very key points.
Okay, and the second point is having to do with measurements, which, as you know, is one of the major learning points from the last corporate plan, where it was difficult to find things that we could easily count the report on. So much of it was narrative. Now the team's all changed. Different people in the team doing the work, different manager of the team, different cabinet member doing the work. What's going to be different in this plan, and is it mentioned here in this report? Because I didn't see it.
That is very much an ongoing element that we're developing. I have been working with senior officers in making sure we have the IT resources to do a form of enterprise resource management. So we are able to pull out reports that actually quantitatively show our success in different areas. I believe that measurements, wherever possible, should give a direct show on our performance in different areas that actually are important to our residents. How quickly are the phones being answered? Are they getting an answer the first time they contact us to resolve their question or issue? Other areas, collection of recycling and residual waste. Are we meeting those targets? It's key headlines that should be highly quantifiable. I'm looking forward to a quarterly reporting that is a much more digestible and quantifiable form.
What would you think of asking the public during this consultation what they'd like to see measured?
I think that's a very good idea.
Because there's nothing about measurement in here. So I recommend, and since that was one of the biggest problems we had, in my opinion, with the corporate plan, that we learn from that and tackle that front on and first thing. And then transparency and openness, when the public said that's the most important thing, well, of course you have to finance your work because that's the most important thing. But other than that, transparency and openness was what they wanted to see. And I think that could be more explicit in this. It's not. Those were my two main points.
Thank you, Councillor. I would agree with you regarding the implicitness and perhaps the nuance of discussion around finance and openness, given what we know about the public's perceptions and also the wider national context of local government finances. I don't think we can be too explicit that, as we've seen in our previous discussion, this is a financially really well-run council. Councillor Gascoigne. Oh, sorry, Councillor Pawlowski was waiting online, and then Councillor Gascoigne after that.
Thank you. So referring to the At the Heart of the Vale document, and I very much agree with Councillor Hallett's comments, because whilst it does talk about building a council for the future and maintaining stable finances, the open and transparency section is completely missing from this document. And I think that has to be at the foundation of what is pushed forwards, because it's what the public has commented on before, but I won't labour that point. With regards to the sections, I think when it comes to comments with these themes, and I'd hope that this could be considered, Councillor Fulsham, in the way that you question in your consultation, you talk about providing the homes that people need, but we don't talk about what do those homes look like. So we have a big housing gap, especially with young people. I'm pleased to see the consultation is reaching out to young people, but there's a lot here around the housing, the range of tenures, the housing mix. The housing mix in the Vale isn't right, and we haven't got this right yet, because we've been lumbered with the growth deal. But this needs to be looked at, I think, really, really well. And obviously, there's linked into the joint local plan about where these houses go and what does that place shaping look like? Because you refer to the place shaping in the commentary, but there's nothing really else in here that talks about the place shaping exactly, and people being able to understand what that means. Theme 2, supporting climate and nature recovery, and we've discussed this at length, and I think the Vale is a member of UK 100, and there is a real narrative here around not using the word climate and focusing on environment and nature recovery, because climate is an extremely scary and big subject area. It's hard for people to relate that to where they live, and we're a bit late for preparing for climate change because it's happening and it's here. So how can we be resilient towards it, and where will we build that resilience up? There's lots of talks here. Again, it's all this stuff around partnerships, and lots of money gets ploughed into these partnerships and these memberships, but what does that actually equate to on the ground? And we have an extremely good record, for example, on the Climate Action Fund and other local-led initiatives, and I'd love to see a lot more of that in here around building that resilience at a local level. There's talk in here as well around active travel. That is out of our control in many ways, because obviously it sits with highways, and obviously the policies sit there. So I think it's a really good starter for 10, but I kind of think the aspirations of the people that sit on this council are not quite being reflected in this, and I think it would be really good to see how we can draw more out in a consultation. Looking at your consultation document, there's a huge number, and obviously I'm sure at a great cost, of this engagement plan, and it's really positive to see, but the key is always in the questions, and I think we need to be asking more of our residents in that transparent and open nature, and really drawing out of them what they want. So that would be my comments. Thank you.
Councillor Fulsham, would you like to respond?
Thank you.
There's a lot in there.
There's a lot of stuff to respond to that. First off, I'd like to expand a little on the homes people need and the way this interacts with the joint local plan. This document specifically doesn't say a lot about joint local plan, because that is currently out of consultation. It will be consulted on again when it's a draft plan, and it will then go for inspection. So we can't say for certain what it will do. We can say what we aspire to. We can say what we're aiming for. We can't say it will deliver in this way and in that way. In terms of engagement, I really do want to hear from all sections of our community. And we're going to take a lot of the lessons that we're learning from the new use of our new tools, the citizen space tool and story maps, and we are going to use those to reach a lot more people, a lot wider range of people in this exercise, because actually they've all got a stake in this. This is about how services are going to be delivered for them. And yes, we've got to work in partnership. We've got to bend the ears of county council on active travel. We've got to also work with towns and parishes. We've got to be better about talking to towns and parishes about what we're doing and bringing them along with us. It's a big ask. It's how we're going to do things for the next 4 years.
So if I could just quickly come back, Chair, because I'm not sure you quite answered my questions. So, for example, it still comes back to asking the questions around what are the homes that people need, right? So you know, in Vale we've experienced a huge number of executive homes, big and vast sprawling estates. This isn't about the JLP. This is about Vale's a corporate plan. But to come back to the consultation, as I said, about the communications and engagement plan, which is obviously very, very immense. I'm extremely concerned around some of the consultation that's been held on the JLP so far, around a lot of it happening during working hours. There's been a huge amount of people commenting around that on social media. It's great to see using facilities like the Cornerstone and the Beacon, but will you make this more accessible for people who work? Because not everybody is a digital native, and some people want to see this in person.
That's an interesting point, I must say. What we are seeing is, through the joint local plan consultation, is there is a much higher degree of digital engagement. In-person events have varied widely. I've seen some very well attended local events. I've seen some that really rattled around in the venue. We're learning all the time from those. I think it's actually quite a narrow subset of people who are non-digital native and full-time unavailable during the working week. But we're looking at things. We're not saying this is all fixed. We're going to do the best consultation exercise that the engagement team can come up with.
Thank you.
Chair, could I propose a
Can I
recommendation?
move on to Councillor Gascoigne, please? Councillor Pawlowski, I think Councillor Gascoigne's been waiting patiently as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, so I took the points that quite a few people, that everyone before me has said about, we had about finances and transparency before, and those are missing. However, I just wanted to say that I like the fact that it's now down to 3 themes. I feel like it's easier for people to remember and relate to. And if we can drive it, we're doing this because this relates to one of our 3 things. And I think the openness and transparency in the finances are absolutely important. But yeah, you've obviously brought this new section in about how you do stuff. And I think, so I'm happy with how this is, but perhaps just really mentioning more. I think Councillor Hannett is right that it's not obvious where the transparency comes into it, but it's obvious. It should be in the how we do it, but it's not like as obvious as it used to be. So I think that would be the main change, because I think having 3 themes, I think I would be happy with that update with the previous corporate plan. Then something I wanted to say, this is the clarification, but where you've got like projects in the aspirational projects, they're just examples, right? There could be,
absolutely.
Yeah.
I was going to respond after you finish, but absolutely, these are only a snapshot. I've got a list of 65 different potential projects, all of which married off to one or more of these themes.
Yeah.
So these are only just a sample, and they were deliberately not tying into any particular work stream or particular group team within the council, so people didn't feel they're not talked about my particular area. No, this is broad brush examples rather than specific.
And then, if I may, final point I wanted to make was around, I think it's around the communication and consultation about what the corporate plan really means, because there's something in here about, well, let's call it something that's not the corporate plan, because what does that mean to people? It sounds a bit dry. But I think the more this is my second term as a councillor, and the more I've gone through, I've realised how important this plan is. So for me, the joint local plan site is a really big important one, but this it's almost like our personality as a council. Why are we different from any other group of elected councillors, or you know, not just the elected councillors, the people that work here as well. And so I think that it's how we get that across to the public. And I was just thinking about if we can use examples of where, like in the past, because we had our corporate plan and these were priorities, it meant that these things happened, or I don't know, something along those lines. Kind of always just trying to think of the examples of where it's had an impact. Yeah, and I don't know. Well, one of the things that got mentioned earlier was about in the budget, where the things in the budget link to the corporate plan. So yeah, I think it's just always trying to link to it, because I know the links are there, but how much are we demonstrating them?
If I could come back on that. First off, thank you for highlighting it in 3 themes. That was actually something that I got from Cabinet colleagues. Actually, they brought out something that was in the back of my mind, that it was talking with colleagues, other councillors across the council. People always remember the first few corporate plan themes, and when we got to about 4th, 5th or 6th, it was, what one was that one? And we always got a little bit vague. So hopefully this recasting, it makes it more memorable, and then saying, but just as important is how we deliver it. And yes, I'm really getting the let's talk up the transparency. Not just talk up, but live up the transparency, because actually I want this plan to represent our take on the reasons that we stood for election in the first place back May last year, and what we've discussed in terms of saying we want to deliver. And in 4 years' time, people can look back and say, actually, I want to judge you by, you said in your corporate plan you're going to do this, this, and this. Have you done this, this, and this? Is that what you set out to do? And have you actually done it? Or are you waiting? Or did you jettison it after 18 months? And I really don't want us to be jettisoning any of it over 18 months.
Thank you, Councillor Gaskell. I think just on a practical point, I think your point about keeping the name corporate plan is actually really important. So you think about the practical work that would be needed to go back through every council document and change a reference to corporate plan to something else. Yeah. I think that's probably a practical level, a really important.
You want to keep corporate plan, do you?
Yeah, definitely.
I'm not sure.
It's actually a very fair discussion. There's been differing views on that. That's one reason I wanted a subtitle, at the heart of the Vale, because it actually showed what was actually at the heart of what we were trying to do. Okay. But yeah,
we know you guys love a heart on your literature and stuff.
Corporate does tend to make people go a bit yawn.
Yeah.
But equally, I know that every decision we take has, okay, which section of the corporate plan does this relate to? It's there in every decision that's taken. So,
Councillor Porter.
Yes, I thought I was going to make some new points, but all I'm going to do is echo Councillor Gaskell's point. So I'll try and be as brief as possible. I think first of all, 3 points is really good for a number of reasons. So easy on these sorts of things to have a long wish list of a whole number of things, you know, whatever the last person thought of. And the other thing, it seems to me, is that openness and fiscal responsibility are things that should be embedded in our activity. And they're not actually aspirations of their own right, but they're means by which these other aspirations can be achieved. So I think those three things are good, and I think it's good to keep it short. Personally, I think this is not a corporate plan. It's not like any other corporate plan I've ever seen in my life. And I think that actually it is a turn-off to call it that, and it's not particularly accurate. Now, I see no reason to take your point, Chair, that it couldn't be somewhere in corporate plans for purposes or, you know, documents elsewhere. But I would prefer to see it retitled as a main title to make it something that's more accessible, approachable, and democratic.
Councillor Roberts. Oh, sorry, Councillor Portion, did you want to come back on?
I'll just thank Councillor Porter for his comments there. And
Councillor Rodri.
Yes, I mean, I think one of the problems is best practice is to have a corporate plan and then you put it into action with an action, and then they go it puts things into the budget that allows you to be able to do things. And that is the system, and that's the system that the officers rely on and know that if that's due process followed, their backs are covered. They have full, they can therefore go ahead and do it. If you don't have a system like that, then you're can be in a position of putting officers in place where they don't actually have any paperwork to back them up, and then they're going to go, I'm not terribly comfortable with doing that. So you can call it all sorts of things, and I'm not sure whether it makes a big difference, but I like At the Heart of the Vale, and I like the first two things. I like the how will we do it, except that you were saying you have 65 projects. Are those 65 projects going to be part of the consultation so people can get a flavour of what you're thinking of doing in the how will we do it, so that they can have a bit of a choice as to what they think is important within those projects? And I felt that it's missing a bit about how we will tell you we've done it. I'll stop that point.
Thank you. If I can take the last point first, the how we're going to tell you we've done it. Yes, that is something that will be developed through the process of coming up with the plan, but we want to actually improve our reporting or improve the getting the message out about what we've done. I love our current corporate plan performance report headline summary, the illustrated couple of pages that give us the real headlines. The rest of the stuff I'm not so in love with. So we want better reporting, more accessible for our residents. I'll be working with officers on how we consult on it. But I like the idea of having a lot of lists of our potential projects. But what I don't really want to get into is people sort of doing a beauty parade of we'll have this but less of that and all those. It becomes very hard to sift through at that point. Because some stuff that is decidedly routine and mundane that we need to do, but if it's not particularly attractive to our residents, then it's.
I was just thinking it would give them a flavour of.
Oh yeah, we want to give
that you're going to be making
the sort of things that will be coming out as part of this process, definitely.
And again, maybe part of the engagement should be, well, how would you like to know that we've done it?
Yeah.
You know, actually asking them what kind of information they want to be looking at. Do they want a lovely spreadsheet data nerd with lots of detail, or would they rather have headlines in boxes? And where do they want it? Do they want it on the bottom of the website, or would they like it to be in Vale News, or how do they want to get it back?
That's a very, very good point. What I do also want to see us reporting on is milestones when we hit either having delivered a project or a major step along the road delivering a project. So we know that we're making progress all the way along. It's not a massive sprint. Coming up to the end of 4 years, have we delivered this? Have we delivered that? No, we want to be delivering at every point and celebrating where we have, because it's actually important for our staff to know that we appreciate when they've hit a major milestone. We've delivered that what we were promising, or we've gone this major step towards delivering this, and we'll build on that for the next stage, and then the conclusion comes with the third part of that project.
I want to bring our discussion back to the approaches and the report that we've got here. Councillor Hallett, you had a question.
Yeah, I think the three themes are good. I think they're the three themes that are the top three from the current corporate plans. There's not much change, but that's what we are. Those are the things we said 4 years ago we were, and we still are. So my recommendation would be that in addition to having the themes of what it is we're going to deliver, we have a background of principles by which we're going to deliver it, not how we're going to deliver it, but principles. And that's where the openness and the transparency fits in. Transparency agenda was brought out by the government fairly recently, and it's a thing, there is a transparency agenda from the government about how we
Ironic.
Are transparent. Well, exactly.
Yeah.
They can aspire, but we could do better than they do at that. And one of the things we did put in place was the tracking of our approved motions from council, and that just went live. And that was a transparency thing. And now there's a whole data hub over there that's supporting the transparency agenda, and that's a good start and something that I think we should actively continue and expand where we can. Just more the merrier. So anyway, my recommendation is those three themes are great. Any themes that we agree on are great. And then a background of principles underlying how we deliver those things, I think would be valuable.
Can I come back briefly there?
Yes.
Councillor, I want to thank you for bringing up that idea of the principles by which we will deliver it, as explaining the what, the how, and under the DNA of how we work.
Well, lots of things fit in there. The partnership problem fits in there, and the transparency and the openness and project management skills and deliverables, milestone stuff all fits in there. Thank you. Councillor Batstone.
Yeah, one thing with openness, of course, we should highlight what we've achieved. But I also think in this cause of openness, we ought to also at least mention, if not discuss what we haven't achieved. What we've put in the plan, but for one reason or another, is either slipped or it hasn't happened. And I think in the cause of openness, it's difficult politically, I know, that it's sometimes a good idea to actually tell people why we haven't managed to do something. And I think in total transparency, we ought to be able to find a way of doing that. Because I think there's a great danger of putting something in the plan, and if we can't do it, it sort of just gently disappears. And I think people get frustrated by that if they know that that was in the plan that hasn't happened.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Thank you, Councillor Batstone. I do think that actually that's important, because actually it shows we're learning from our own experiences, and actually we should be big enough to take it on the chin and say, actually, we promised to do this and we've not got there. We can either say we've not got there for very good reasons, because priorities changed, funding's changed, whatever, or we've got there because we didn't have capacity. But yes, we're learning those lessons, and yes, that element can be built into the report, and I think it should be.
If I may, I just have one more question regarding process and what the plan is, because page 14 of the report, we have milestones and the process. December 2023 to February 2024, we have draft themes prepared, then a whole bunch of bullet points, presumably given the timeline of work that is now 2/3 of the way through. But we don't have any evidence of any of that here. Given that Cabinet are being asked to make a decision on this next week as well, I just wonder, Councillor Fulsham, what of the actual material of that have you seen, do you know has been done? So all of the content, all of the comms, the engagement material, the organisation of the events, the databases, the engagement survey, all of that has apparently been done between December and February, and we're now into February.
Right, probably jumping on that. So in terms of for this particular thing, I suppose that we were actually looking at hanging it off the actual theme. So the themes being developed is got to be the first starting point. So that's where we are at this moment in time. So I suppose as we're looking at the approach in terms of those other things that will be in there to support it, we've already talked about the JLP consultations, and so we'll be learning some lessons from those things. So in terms of the actual putting together the materials, that can be something that we can work off as officers and get those done as we go. In terms of the engagement stuff that we talked about, we'll actually be looking to go out to where people naturally sort of gather. So we're not looking to create a whole new range of events or things specific to this. And that's what we're kind of talking about in the actual engagement plan. So I suppose in terms of the actual creation of some of those things, we wanted to make sure that we got through in terms of endorsing what the approach is, and that's why we're here. But the actual formulating the actual materials is to come.
Okay, so I guess my comment would be it's difficult to endorse an approach when the evidence of the practical approach is not here. We have the information about the themes and that, which is the approach to our ideas, but the kind of practical approach, and it's just telling to me that we should be 2/3 of the way through that particular section that's outlined on page 14, and it just seems that that material is not yet available. So it is very strong. I appreciate there's different kind of statutory requirements for consultation and engagement, but it's a very striking contrast to the JLP.
Yeah, I would stress that it's not a statutory consultation. It's a different beast completely.
But as cabinet member, are you confident that all of that material will be ready for when you go out?
I've got confidence in the team that will put it together. Our comms and engagement teams are very good. They have new tools that have been deployed for some small consultations at the end of last year, and now very much front and centre for the joint local plan. They're good at what they do. I'm confident they can come up with stuff that will actually capture this and take the temperature of our residents and those concerned with our corporate plan and find out if it meets their dreams, aspirations, requirements. So that's what we're wanting to find out.
Councillor Hallett, last point, and then we'll move to recommendations.
Yeah, we always hear in scrutiny about the good things and the good things that it's going to produce, and that progress has been good, and the access has been good, and here you have high confidence and that it's all going to work out. What are the risks that you've identified? And I think that should be part of this consideration. Also, didn't I remember that there's a brand new consultation software, which would maybe be a risk? But I appreciate your optimism, because you have to have the optimism or nothing will ever work. I appreciate that. But from a realistic point of view, the chair has brought up some things that she would have expected to be ready to be viewed, at least in draft form by this time, first week of February. What are the risks, and how are those being addressed? That's a better question. Not what are the risks, how are you addressing the risks is, I think, what I'm interested in. And that's my last.
Very good question. I'll answer it in two ways. First off, covering off the new software, that is the citizen space tool that I first saw trialled the day before we took it to the Joint Local Plan Steering Group, and my heart was in my mouth thinking, this is high profile. It's a key consultation. We need to get this right. And I have to say, it worked flawlessly. I get to see a lot of survey tools in my, dare I say, day job side of my work, and in the university department where surveying opinion on various issues is key. And there are some absolute dogs of survey software. Anybody who's battled the Survey Monkey over the years will know how bad it can be.
We do need to move.
Yeah, the citizen space tool is probably best of breed. It works well. The team have mastered it. They're good at developing.
That's what's going to be used for this consultation?
That will be used for this consultation. In terms of risks, there are two risks. The major risk I see is that this consultation strategy does not capture what key consultees, which are our residents, staff team, and our councillors, need to be in this plan. That's key. The other, and we can cover that off by actually making sure we do the consultation right. The other risk is that we don't have the resources to deliver it, or we're too ambitious in what we put into the plan. For that, I'm relying on talking very regularly and earnestly with my cabinet colleagues, particularly our cabinet member for finance, to make sure that we're not writing cheques that our council tax can't cash. So that's the other key risk. Those two I'm focused on laser-like.
Thank you. Can I move us to recommendations now? I think for me, the obvious one I've come up with that we've come up with this discussion is really that we really need to strongly recommend to Cabinet, we know you're already thinking about this, is the measurement and the quantitative element, and including within that, it's the reporting, the measures and milestones. So I think that would be a key recommendation, which I'm sure you're already, I think, and I'm going to look to my committee members to nod or shake their heads, is that I think many of us raised that transparency, openness, and finance, financial competence, responsibility need to be absolutely explicit. Not necessarily a theme, but they need to be absolutely explicit repeatedly, just to reassure residents, because that's what they think of and that's what they expect. Would that be a fair recommendation?
Yes.
Or a reflection of our group discussion?
Yeah, but not necessarily in the three.
No, that's what I'm saying, but the kind of the subtext of all the other, it needs to be within there. No, I'll take the point that many of you felt that the three themes was a good approach to reduce it to three. Then there was a discussion about the wording of corporate plan and to ensure that you don't inadvertently create an enormous amount of work by renaming a document, but that could probably be played with in terms of headings and
Indeed.
things like that. It might be that the document itself is referred to internally as the corporate plan, but the public facing. Would that be?
That's about right.
Other recommendations that I've perhaps missed?
I'm kind of feeling strongly now about risk management in the project of the corporate plan. So I would recommend that the project board, whoever that is, have risk management, active risk management as one of the things they do at their meetings and take care of that in a proactive way. You can say that, can do that however you like. I think you can say that however you like. Risk management and
Risk management taken on by the project board.
Would other committee members be happy to include that as our recommendation?
Yeah.
So unless anyone has any, I have that as 4 recommendations.
So I've got here, in terms of reporting, you were talking about measures and milestones, and also you said about asking the public how they would like that to be as well. Is that right?
I was suggesting that, yes, that part of the engagement should be to ask them what's
that element of finding out what people want to see.
Yeah.
And then you've got transparency and openness and the fiscal responsibility items, which were part of the corporate plan themes. They're not now, they're proposed not to be now, but you're wanting to see it be written explicitly within the document.
Yeah.
That, obviously it's embedded, but you want that put in there. Make sure that's obvious. Then you talked about, I just get a bit of clarification from you about renaming the corporate plan. You're suggesting that could be done through headings, but
I think something like the public-facing name.
Public-facing one be more
may be different from corporate plan, but that it should be renamed the corporate plan for the purposes of the documentation within the district council. Is that right? Isn't it?
Okay. Yeah, I've got that. Is that everyone okay with that one? And then the last point would be active risk management be taken on by the project board. Yes. Yeah. Is that okay? Officers are.
We can run with that.
Well, again, we can recommend it, and it's up to cabinet what they do with those recommendations.
Those 4 items.
Okay, I'll propose that.
Thank you, Councillor Porter. Second, Councillor Walker, thank you very much. Okay,
Is everyone in agreement?
Everyone happy with those recommendations?
Yeah.
Happy. Lovely. Thank you so much. Thank you ever so much. Good luck.
Thank you.
With your hearts and fails. Love that. Thank you ever so
Thank
much.
you for your comments. They've been very useful.
Right, thank you for your time this evening.
Thanks, Andy.
Let's take a 2-minute break, and then we will come back to.
Can I just say that anyone online, we're still here, but I'm going to switch the screen off in the room,
and we'll
be back in a couple of minutes.
2 minutes, yeah. Thank you. Okay, welcome back, everybody. Thank you for rejoining us. So we're moving on to the final item of our very long meeting, and thank you ever so much for waiting so long. Item 9 is Future of the Beacon report, potential Future of the Beacon report in Wantage. We have Councillor Helen Pickhills, Cabinet Member for Community Health and Wellbeing, here this evening, joined by Andrew Busby, who's our Head of Development and Corporate Landlord. Thank you both very much. Before we start, I should note that we have 2.5 hours for this meeting. If we want to go, we can add an extra 30 minutes on, but that will involve a committee vote. So if we could just be mindful of the time as we head towards 9 o'clock, if we want that extra time. Thank you very much. Councillor Pickhills, can I ask you to introduce your...
Another 2 hours. So, good evening, everyone. Quick introduction, then I'm going to draw out some of the main points of the report. Since we came into administration in 2019, it's been a priority to seek to maximise the benefit of the beacon for the health and wellbeing of our residents across the Vale, but also working to reduce the subsidy by the council. And this links to our current corporate plan objectives of building healthy communities and building stable finances. Unfortunately, the progress of this was not helped by the COVID pandemic, which resulted in the centre being closed between March 2020 and September 2021, when it was repurposed as a testing centre and staff were redeployed. It's therefore taken time to properly consider options for the future of the beacon, both from an operational perspective and in terms of the building itself. Through 2022 and 23, officers commissioned a range of advisory reviews of the beacon, including those by Otis and Estates Management and Bryn Jones Associates. And these reviewed a range of options for members to consider in relation to the future of the centre. The reviews and further investigations have provided guidance for immediate and ongoing operational changes, as well as options for future management of the beacon. It should, however, be noted that these reports each reflect a specific point in time, recognising that there are some inaccuracies and assumptions within them, and that by their nature, the situation described in them may no longer be accurate. So the report in front of you sets out a range of future options for the beacon and includes an action plan that seeks to optimise the operation of the in-house model. Subject to Cabinet approval and approval by Council of implementation costs, this action plan will be implemented and a review will be presented to Cabinet during Q3 of 2024-25. Please note that while we've openly shared as much detail in the public reports as possible, appendices 2, 4, 6 and 7 are confidential and would need to be discussed in a closed session. We are committed to exploring and implementing all reasonable actions to improve the medium-term financial viability of the beacon, while still offering substantial benefit to the community. And in order to achieve this, some investment is required. While the council may be able to bid for external funding towards some works and projects, it will also require continued financial investment by the council. So officers have developed a beacon development action plan, collating the recommendations and opportunities identified in the various consultant reviews, associated stakeholder consultations, and from the officer working group. Table 1 on page 38 of your pack provides a summary list of the action plan objectives. And page 46 of Appendix 1 sets out in more detail the objectives and responsibilities and target dates, etc. Longer-term actions can only be indicative at this stage, as the plan will need to be kept under review and as the impact of earlier changes is considered. In 1977, the council entered into an agreement with Wantage Town Council regarding user rights for the beacon. This agreement gives the Town Council rights to office space, access and use of communal areas, and free use of the venue for democratic meetings and civic functions each year in return for an agreed annual contribution towards various running costs and utilities, and there is no separate charge for occupation. The confidential Appendix 4 gives more information about this. It is therefore important to set out in the recommendations for engagement to take place with the Town Council. Initial delivery of the Beacon Development Action Plan is expected to cost around £22,000. This in particular includes £17,000 for a 1-year 0.4 FTA fundraising post, and officers will review the impact of the fundraising post in year. The cost of this investment is expected to be offset by the target income and savings the action plan could realise. We should bear in mind that recent reviews have demonstrated that a staffed venue like the Beacon is unlikely to be able to cover its full operating costs. The Beacon is therefore likely to need to rely on financial support to continue to deliver the benefit it offers to the community. But implementing the action plan should maximise income opportunities and reduce the level of financial contribution required from the Council. Appendix 2 of the report gives some indicative details of potential future operating models as informed by the Bryn-Jones Consultants report. So, just quick summary. There are several measures that the Council can take to improve the Beacon's performance, and these improvements have formed the basis of the action plan detailed in the report and Appendix 1. And implementation of a number of these measures has already begun. While the Council should consider possible alternatives to the in-house delivery, it should first ensure that the in-house model is operating to its best potential by endorsing the action plan. And establishing a clear understanding of the Council's stepping in rights in relation to any potential external operating model is essential before the Council could make any formal commitment. Officers will work with corporate programmes team to report and monitor delivery of the action plan, and the Beacon team will provide regular updates to the Officer Working Group, Cabinet members and other key stakeholder groups outlining the progress. I'm joined tonight by Andrew, and we've also got Susan Malcolm, Deputy Chief Executive for Police, who's online, and we welcome any comments or questions that you may have. And sorry that was a bit long.
Thank you, Councillor Pickles. That's great. Committee members, can I invite Councillor Border?
Thank you very much, Councillor Pickles H. This is the first time I've really come to grips with the Beacon, or I haven't come to grips with it yet, I must admit. My first reaction is it's not a terribly great story to find ourselves with, quite frankly. It seems to be, you obviously made the point that it provides a lot of services to local residents, but it actually provides basically a lot of local services to residents in Wantage. Certainly before I became a member of this council, I didn't even know the Beacon existed, so it certainly hadn't got as far as Abingdon. And so what we're doing with this very substantial deficit is transferring substantial sums of money from one part of the Vale to another part of the Vale. And I didn't really see anything in the report based on the action plan, which gave me confidence that the amount of the loss that the Beacon is making is going to come down, actually. When I looked at the action plan itself, obviously there are a number of things that have happened so far, coffee shops and things like that, you know. But what hadn't started was the bit about fundraising and the strategy and resources things, which I would have thought were the absolutely critical thing if we're going to start addressing this very substantial financial deficit. And the other thing that came across to me, again, you know, very much the first time, is if I were, I would think the best thing you can do is offload this, preferably to a Wantage Town Council, whose beat is over, I think. Because I just I don't have any confidence that we can actually run this successfully from the paper that I've seen so far. But I just get that sort of hesitancy throughout the whole document about the council really be interested in looking at alternative ownership strategies. It talks about them, but it keeps on giving reasons why they shouldn't happen. And that was my impression of the report.
Councillor Pickles.
Right, quite a few things there. Yes, it is in Wantage, and it does obviously mainly offer a service to Wantage, but I think it covers the wider western part of the Vale as well. I mean, it's the same as leisure centres. You can't have it in every village. You know, they tend to be centralised. And I think one of the things we do need to understand is where the audience is coming from. I go there from Abingdon, and it's nothing to do with being the cabinet member. I mean, typically, I'm going next week, so that'll be 3 times since last summer. So typically 4 times a year. I suppose, ideally, though, I could take your point that this sort of facility would be run by the town, but it isn't. And that's where we are now. But it does give great benefit. And I think we need to do the best to get it going, get the in-house model working the best it can, which then puts us in a better position to see what the alternatives are. Whether they be some arrangement with the town council or with other partners. It's taken a long time to get to this stage. As I said, from 2019, and closing it during the COVID pandemic hasn't helped at all. So this report has been difficult to do because of the lack of up-to-date information about costs, such like in the post-pandemic world. So it probably doesn't sound very optimistic, but I feel optimistic that we can make it better. And you said about you said something else at the end that you said should have been implemented already.
Yes, that's right. I think that I fear my right.
Oh, the fundraising.
The fundraising, that's right, and the sort of stuff. It had done a lot of the small things, but it didn't lead to me. The big things have been deferred. Yeah.
I think the small things could be done anyway, whereas the officers really need the endorsement by cabinet and council to carry on to do these sort of more significant things. That'd be.
Sorry, thank you, Helen. Yeah,
anything you'd like to add?
Yes, the action plan is key to making sure that we do make the best of the beacon. We also take on all of your comments regarding fundraising. That has to be high up on the agenda. I also think it's absolutely key to any future of that building is to make sure we engage with Hornsey Town Council as set out in the recommendations.
I'm just sorry, I do apologise. I'm very conscious actually that I probably made a speech that was more direct than I would have made earlier in the evening, actually. So, I lost some of the soft adverbs along the way. So,
I think the key word was offload. Councillor Pawlowski.
Yeah, I'm glad that Councillor Forder has thought about his language there. As someone who represents the Springline villages, then this is a facility that is much loved, and obviously there has been issues in a recovery from COVID. But Councillor Pickles, I'd like to ask the question as, how much engagement has been had already with the community? The reason that I ask is, the Beacon provides a venue for a lifeline, for example, with the Wantage Food Larder and other sustainability events that take place in there, which are, providing a service and for many people, helping with cost of living crisis. I do agree that there's an issue around public buildings that are owned by councils because there's been a huge amount of funding out there, which has been available to community run or not for profit run organisations. If you have a look at things like the Makerspace and the Down to Earth Cafe and how successful those sorts of things have been, I'm just worrying, 22k is just another amount of money being thrown away around an action plan where the reality is if you've got the key elements of people in and around Wantage who are already utilising the facility or running similar community facilities, I'm sure they could come up with a huge number of really good ways and be invested in how to turn the Beacon around. Otherwise, just another 22k for a piece of paper with an action plan, which might sit around, nothing might happen with it. There's an active and vibrant community in Wantage. And, for example, have we looked at green grants or have we looked at the green, I can't remember what the exact was, the funding. So Berkshire have just done it. You open it up to community fundraising. You invest it as a green grant. You've already stated there's £1 million needs to be raised. Well, I would challenge you could do that through a green grant option and actually raise that in the community to keep the community facility going. What I don't see in here is enough engagement with the community on the ground in an open and transparent way around, look, this is what we face. How can we all pull together? I just can't. I can't make a recommendation that 22k is okay to spend again after 3 consultations already or 3 reports already.
Councillor Pickett.
Yeah, the 22 is for mainly for the 1 year fundraising post. So that is a member of staff focusing on fundraising. Consultation with the you were able to start as part of the review, wasn't it?
It was, and thank you for your comments. But we've got build relationships with local grouping, including town centre partnerships and business networks, education providers. It is set out within the action plan, and absolutely it provides community support. I'm actually joined with Carol Cunningham, who's our Arts Centre manager. Carol, could you add what we currently support with the community, set out any engagement to date?
Yep, of course. So we have undertaken a number of engagement processes already. So at the open days we've had in the last few years, we've done surveys of the users and used them as a vehicle to get people's opinions and thoughts on what they want from the centre. As part of the Bryn Jones consultation, there was also a number of focus groups done with both existing users and with people as part of the residents panel who don't already use the centre to try and gather their thoughts and input about what the centre could be doing for them, what they know about us, things like that. There's a number of actions within the action plan as well that look to expand on that work and engage more with the community using resources already in the team. So that wouldn't be part of the funding that's being requested. That would be working with the engagement, consultation and engagement team and the community enablement teams to actually get out there and get even better links with the community groups in and around Wantage, the ones that are already working with us and the ones that we aren't connected with yet.
Thank you. Brilliant. Oh, Councillor Hallett.
Thank you. I don't think anyone disputes how well loved the beacon is. And Councillor Pawlowski pointed out lots of other uses that I was unaware of. But the elephant in the room is how much this is costing the residents of the Vale. For at least 10 years, every year, Scrutiny would recommend and request and urge the officer team to come back with a plan that breaks even. And I actually am relieved, and I thank you now for this report, which clearly states what I've suspected for a decade. That's just not possible. It's not the kind of thing that's meant to make enough profit to support this aging building and the officers that are needed to run it. From my point of view, I represent residents who live in the northeast corner of the Vale, up in Vale. I had never heard of the beacon either, but my residents and I pay every month to keep it going. So Abingdon found a solution to the problem by turning their cultural centre over to the town council to run. I don't know. I think that the question should be asked, is this a service at this cost that this Vale should be running for our residents? Is this serving our residents by having all of the residents pay in their council tax this deficit every year, £500,000? My opinion is my opinion, and it's worth 5p. But I think that good governance and good decision making would be asking that tough question. The action plans that focus on shifting the deck chairs rather than focusing on alternative funding that can save this much loved community asset, I think is misguided effort. I think they should have been doing fundraising all along with an extreme sense of urgency. I think this is a facility in trouble. It's a service in trouble. It's not statutory. We're doing it out of our feelings of that this is a good thing for the community, but I question after what we've seen in terms of budgets, whether we can afford to continue to do this. This is a large percentage of our annual revenue budget. I wonder, do these numbers include council taxes or the rates on the property and the maintenance and all of that? Is that everything? The 400 some thousand pounds?
Yes, it does.
Okay.
Would you like to respond to the comment?
I'm sorry. I feel that way.
No, I mean, as I said, in an ideal world, I think that, maybe the town or the community should be running the building, but we don't live in an ideal world, do we? We are where we are. And absolutely key to this is talking to the town council and seeing how they feel about it. And also, alongside that, looking at alternative operating models. But in the meantime, we need to use the action plan to get the in-house model as good as it can be. I think that's the basic position, really. And so, and we need to decide, don't we, really collectively as a council, to decide what level of subsidy we feel is acceptable for this sort of facility.
So I would ask to follow Councillor Hallett. Has the transfer to Abingdon Town Council of the Abingdon property been a success? Is that something we would want to follow? And secondly, is in terms of the action plan, is it the case that seems to be implied that the action plan is actually the only possible action plan at this time until we've discussed with Wantage Town Council?
The discussion with Wantage Town Council is key because of their use of the building, their rights regarding the use of the building. I'm trying to think. The report does talk about, in parallel, looking at other options. In terms of Abingdon, the transfer to Abingdon Town Council, that happened when I was a very new councillor in 2010. And it went with a very significant sum of money to the Town Council to enable them to sort it out and get it running. In the interim period, it spent a lot of time there's two parts of the building in Abingdon. There's the 1960s Abbey Hall part of the building, and then there's the historic Guildhall rooms. And for a lot of the time, the Abbey Hall part was closed. And the Town Council were looking at different ways of trying to run it. Has it been a success?
I'm not sure. I mean, I've only been on the Town Council for a year, but actually I'm now leading the Abbey Hall refurbishment working party. So I'm pretty up to date on this. And the answer is that it has been successfully culturally. We've got a very successful cinema there, which is actually much loved, and that's working well. But our strategy is to put the building right, which needs doing, and then put it out on a long-term lease and not to run it ourselves. And I think that's the issue for me. I'm not saying councils should privatise everything, but I just don't think we're good at running commercial operations like this. I think we should be my first reaction for anything like this is we should be looking at a private operator to run it. And it may even cost some money in order to facilitate that actually happening. But for us to continue to leak this sort of money year after year without any real sense that we're ever going to be able to find a solution, or I haven't been able to see one in that paper, really doesn't seem the right way to go ahead to me.
We should say that in terms of the Abingdon facility, it has taken more than 10 years to get to this point.
That's fair, but it's all under control now.
And there was, as I say, significant capital sum, I presume, the capital from the Vale to the Town Council.
There was a substantial endowment because the building was in poor shape and it needed to be. But
yeah, we do need to return to the discussion. I think that was the question. Is really if we're going to continue this meeting, we do need to take a vote, and I suspect I need a proposal This is the first time, as a new chair, this is the first time this has happened to me.
I propose an extension of the meeting.
For how long?
So it'll be
Well,
half an hour's
well,
Maximum of
Up to half an hour.
Now, a second now.
Okay,
Should
shall
we
we?
allow the maximum?
We've got everybody, people in favour of that then?
Yeah. Yeah, let's finish it.
Right.
Okay, thank you, everybody. That means we have until 9:30, and that is our absolute maximum discussion. We could, during this extension, if we wanted, vote again to go into a confidential session should we need to, but that would be quite tight, and that's a possibility. But Councillor Roberts.
Yes, okay, I'll try and keep it, no, I won't go over previous things. Yes, this has been kicking around for 10 years with exactly the same comment as we had 10 years ago with the that administration's 5-year plan to break even, and this doesn't look any different. The big problem we have is that the building is now 10 years older, and there's an awful lot of new housing in the area, which is having new community facilities being part and parcel of the new developments. So you've actually increased your competition and decreased the viability of the building in that time, which makes every situation worse. It worries me that in the action plan, there's no real timescale saying how long, and the discussions with Wantage Town Council are going to go on for. I really think if we're going to go, it's clearly obvious that we need to go down that line. I think it needs to have very clear-cut parameters set on that, so that we don't get to another 5-year plan and another 5-year plan. We need a time limit on that and say, right, a conclusion has to come by whatever time we feel. And then if that conclusion hasn't come to any sensible conclusion, we haven't got anywhere, then we have to pursue some of the other options that were, there is a paper that has several options, and we have to pursue some of the options that we can do without agreement with Wantage Town Council. So it is going to leak money. It is going to become less and less competitive. It should be in a good position being in the centre of town, but the parking is difficult. There's a whole lot of problems that come with being in the centre of the town without large car parks near it. It doesn't look as if we've got anywhere further forward than in 2013 when this was first presented to us, except that the figures of the loss are now considerably more than the 129,000 that we had presented to us in 2013. Well, actually, that was the value in 2009, and we had 200,000 that we would wanted to get back to 129. So, it's just got worse and worse the longer these figures have been presented. I think we need a time limit. I think otherwise we have to do something a lot more drastic with our future plans of what we can and can't do. But yes, we need to pursue action and not just go into a further plan that says Q4 25-26 yet to start. I'm not happy with that timescale at all. And if we need to go into the commercial confidential to talk about the options that are available in those papers, well, then so be it. But I just think this is deja vu all over again, 10 years down the line in a worse position.
I suppose it's, you sort of hope someone will come along and say, yeah, I'll run it, and we'll make some money and we'll take the problem off your hands. But I think we should be realistic about
you've got in-house staff versus community group. At least the community group is invested, but they don't have quite the same skill set. So they have pros and cons, but they both have cons, and none have worked for the last 10 years, and I don't think that's a good pattern.
Councillor Pobolowski online has been waiting for a while.
All I was going to say was, one, have we looked at climate bond fundraising? And if we haven't, is that something we can make as a recommendation to Cabinet? And two, is there a possibility of having, there's a lot of comments being made from people who don't live in the area. Is there a possibility of having a sort of brainstorming session with councillors that are in the local area, in the locality, because we're all connected to local groups who may wish to have a stake in or do something around the beacon, or maybe don't even understand what the options are for renting out the beacon. So there's sort of two recommendations I'd like to put out. I echo what everyone else is saying around cost and black hole and a money sink, but it just feels like over the years and the money that's been invested in consultations, action plans, consultancies, there's a real lack here of actually the connection to the town. And Councillor Roberts, I disagree with your statement around other facilities in new estates and new areas. We're supposed to be about trying to reduce carbon and reduce travel. The centre of Wantage is ideal for most people to get to, and we've now got our fantastic EV chargers outside as well. So just could they be two possible? I know I can't vote because I'm sat here with Lebsit, but could they be two recommendations? Get councillors.
I think we'll put them into the mix. Certainly, I think
I think it's worth saying we did start the process in 2019 by getting together a councillor group to look at this issue, and it was open to all councillors and who were interested. And we had, I think you came along to a couple of them, and there were about 5 or 6 of us possibly, and I think we very quickly came to the conclusion that we did need outside advice. And that was the germ of the idea of the 2 consultancies. One was taking advice from people who know about running these facilities, and the other was regarding the options of just looking at it as a piece of real estate neglect. So that's where the consultations originally came from, was from starting from councillors talking about it.
Thank you, that's very helpful.
So we've been there, but worth revisiting maybe.
Councillor Batson, as a local member, would you like to jump in?
Yes, I do enjoy using the beacon, and yes, I would like it to continue. My worry about the action plan is there seems to be a lot happening in the next 12 months, and I think if this does happen, and nothing's happened in the last few years on the beacon, then we might be able to say something more positive in 12 months' time. If I think there are a lot of very good ideas here that we ought to give them the chance to pursue anyway. We are saying that lots of these activities should be completed within 12 months. So since we've waited such a long time, waiting another 12 months and looking at, for example, looking at fundraising possibilities in the next 12 months, I think is reasonable at this stage. I think to take any drastic, to suggest any drastic actions without going through some of this action plan would be premature.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Hallett, unless it doesn't. Yeah.
I was going to say that I think that maybe the Cabinet should be taking some advice about how this would appear under the best value considerations that are legal requirements. Maybe I'll know something about that. We have a facility or a service here in the Beacon that's continually losing more and more money. It's lost millions, and we've continually tried to fix it and failed. And now we have another proposal here to consider trying it again. And I don't see anything different, but I would worry that we've tried this before and we're not making any progress at improving things. And that's what the best value consideration could be interested in. And so I'm a little concerned about that. And it might be worth recommending that at least they take some advice on that.
Yes, I could take his comments on board, and obviously we take best value into account in everything we do. Absolutely, this action plan throughout is all associated with achieving best value. We're actually identifying where we can add improvements, and that's what we're imposed to do. And certainly take those comments on board about identifying timeframes as well.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Forder and then Councillor Gascoigne.
I think by you listen to everyone, and certainly to Councillor Batson, but always a sense, is that we should, my recommendation, be that we should ask Cabinet to accelerate the process as much as possible, and to start exploring seriously alternative ownership structures, so accelerate that as well. And also accelerating looking for other forms of funds and fundraising. So in other words, what I think I've really come to the conclusion is this is probably as good a plan as we can make, but we just want it to be done more quickly.
Properly.
And I've heard that said many times in business. So
in terms of this question about fundraising, I'm trying to establish what you and Councillor Pawlowski said. Is the concern that not enough resources being put into fundraising?
Well, it was as I understand it was on one of the list of action points was to look at external fundraising, and there were lots of ticks on other things which perhaps were easier to do, but that one hasn't actually been started yet, as far as I could remember.
That's correct. So we've got on line 13 of the action plan, we've got the investment of the fundraising person.
And the assumption is once that person who will be an expert is in post, they will precisely be able to look at precisely the kind of things that Councillor Pawlowski is.
Yeah.
But what we don't need is someone who's looking at £5,000 here or £10,000 here. Right. We're looking for someone who's going to actually look for a substantial investment in the thing, and part for ownership or something like that, because just getting £10,000 from some grant, which is going to reduce the loss to 450 from 460, isn't really worth the effort.
Yeah, I mean quite literally, because you're paying the person to find that money, but I'm sure they've got that in hand. So what I'm hearing is, so what I felt when I got into this, I don't have the history that the councillors across from me have, but it's good that you're here to bring that perspective. I feel that it is obviously a really important community asset. I'm not sure whether I quite buy into whether I'm worried where it's located. To your point about, the facilities have to be somewhere, and maybe it all comes out in the wash, right? If we have enough of these different things that the community can access throughout our area. Okay, but to get to the point, my question is around. I hear the concerns of the councillors across from me. We've all done this before, but perhaps you could explain what is different this time. I'm only seeing this talk about the beacon. I haven't seen something about this before. I know about the beacon, but you mean this is the first report I've seen. I've been on Scrutiny since I've been elected, past 5 years. So what's different about this than the things that have come before?
I wasn't a councillor when the things that came before. Yeah. So I can't comment on what depth it was looked at in the past, and there's no one here who can actually comment.
Well, they came to scrutiny every year, and they came to scrutiny every year, and maybe because we were the opposition instead of the administration, you might have missed it, but I sat in Kat's chair for those years and saw those reports every year. We're going to make a go of this. We're going to cut the shortfall down to £100,000, and then it just kept. Well, you saw that.
Yeah. Well, I think the question about what is different is an important one that we.
So, from my point of view, what's different to previous reviews from what I've seen? Council invested in those consultancy reports, which were really important to establish baseline data and basically be able to reflect to bring this action plan to you. In addition to that, the council recognised that resourcing in the specialist arts centre specialism area is key, and that's also on the action plan. Hasn't been done before, to my knowledge. So, I've reflected what's been done before and what I've seen on reports. To me, this is a step up from what's been presented perhaps previously, because you've invested in those consultants' independent reports.
I suspect historically, we can't avoid the fact that we came into office in 2019, and in 2020 we had the pandemic, and that really did stop everything. So really that's delayed things for a few years, I think.
On those reports, does the committee want, obviously there are 2 reports that the public haven't had access to that we have. Do the committee want to go into a confidential session now quickly to discuss more of the detail of the report, or are we happy working with the?
I personally don't think it's necessary. We've had the inclusions of the report.
Yep.
And I mean, there's a limit to the amount of detail that we can deal with here, really. You know, in the end, the basis is that it was 460, and it looks like the forecast is if only the report starts going well, we go down to 420. I think there's nothing further, no further projections than that. So whether we believe that, we can believe that or not, but it doesn't seem to be a huge amount of difference.
That's right.
Yeah, I just wanted to, I knew I'd read it and I couldn't find it. It was actually the action plan in Appendix 1 varies quite significantly with a lot of detail from the action plan that's actually in the document. And I thought I knew I'd read it places, and I found what I'd read, which is that the discussions with Wantage Town Council should be, it says by Q3 on the main one, but in the Appendix 1, it's within 12 months. So if this is February, we're talking about February 25. They will have finished discussions with the Wantage Town Council according to this action plan. And then the carbon one is revisit the carbon plan. So I'm guessing that there was one and that I don't know what happened to it, but there is a carbon plan that says action within 18 months. It would be nice to maybe shorten that 18 months if we can. And then action 21 is produce detailed feasibility studies for alternative model. So effectively saying by April 25, we will look at alternative models. Well, actually, if it had been presented that way, I don't think I would have been quite so against it, because that's saying, right, we are going to make the decision with Wantage Town Council by February 25. We are looking at various ways like fundraisings in there, carbon management plans in there, and then depending on what the discussions with Wantage Town Council come to, we will then adopt future strategy by April 25. Now that strikes me as quite a reasonable plan of action. And I hadn't really, until we were having this discussion, pulled out that information and that timetable.
I do remember seeing that. It does still seem to be, perhaps I've got my business head back, but it seems an awful long time, actually. One of the things about the discussions with Wantage Town Council is, what does that mean? Does it mean they've got to be finished, or there's just got to be some agreement in principle? Because I can't see any reason why there can't very rapidly be a decision whether Wantage Town Council are actually interested in going ahead and on what basis. That really shouldn't take a year to work out.
I think it is a legal agreement, and as soon as you put the word legal anywhere.
Well, no, that's right. But if you're going to have a full legal agreement, but the most crucial thing is to discover whether Wantage Town Council is interested or not. Because if they're not interested, then we've lost apparently from the report what seems to be the major opportunity of getting out of this hole that
I'm being advised by officers, if we want to go any further into the discussion about Wantage Town Council, we will need to go into a confidential session. I think the key is that is the crux of this.
Well, it's the timing. It's just the time.
So it's the timing we're interested in. Is to speed up.
I can commit to that. That'll be one of the very early actions that we're taking.
Can I ask to follow that up then? One of the things that I can't see in the action plan, I may be missing, is that there is no element in the action plan to report back to Cabinet and to scrutiny within the time.
In the recommendations, it states that we'll be bringing back a report in Q3.
Perfect.
And of course, I suspect Cabinet will wish it to come here first.
I think we can request it comes here. Thank you. Sorry, I missed that bit. Brilliant. Recommendations. Yes, I think we should. We've got 16 minutes left, so let's move to some formulating some recommendations. So in terms of, I think what the clear message is, we need clear time parameters. There are some time parameters within this. If at all possible, they can be expedited so that we are sure when we get to that Q3 that we have a very clear understanding of what our options are, so that this isn't a can that gets kicked down the road again. And then there was a discussion about consulting with local members specifically. I think perhaps does that need to be revisited, that discussion? Would we recommend?
Yeah.
It's obviously been happened before.
was some time ago that wasn't it. I think it would be a good idea to convene that meeting to see what ideas they have as well.
Yes.
Yes, I mean, one type of model with this kind of facility is to have a community action group that runs it.
Yeah.
And so if we're going to talk to Wantage Town Council, perhaps we should be talking to community action groups to see if there are any action groups that want to take it on in the same time frame, so that you've got information in parallel rather than one following the other, but actually have it all running concurrently.
Well, one of the problems we have is we see ourselves as a district council, as Wantage as the town council, and we sort of, almost in an oppositional sort of environment, whereas actually what should be happening, all people of goodwill in Wantage should be getting together in order to see whether there's an alternative structure that can be used, which this group should form a group.
I should say, of course, that local members are always welcome to address scrutiny on matters that they consider important, just as we address council, and of course they can address cabinet as well. But no, I think that's a good recommendation to revisit that local engagement.
Just to chair, the conclusion section does talk about monitoring the performance plan and timescales and what we're actually up to. So hopefully that will help.
Thank you. Other recommendations that are important?
Wish we had some.
Do we have a recommendation that we would like Cabinet to review the time limit the consultations take place? I mean, it's giving the paper saying basically a year. The committee happy with that?
I think we should try and accelerate it. Yeah, I would suggest
maybe we should have an update.
We ask them to look at the accelerator,
rather than put pressure on negotiations. Ask for an update at 6 months from now as to how negotiations are progressing.
I honestly think that after we've had this amount of time, I think the timescales currently are reasonable. I think if you try to push them, they'll put too much pressure on officers. There's an awful lot in this action plan.
Yes.
That's going to happen within the next 12 months. So I think pushing timescales tighter
doesn't usually make negotiations go.
Okay.
I suppose it's doing the difficult things rather than the easy things. I mean, I think a lot of easy things have been done. I mean, they require a lot of hard work. But the really difficult things are looking at the way it's structured and looking at funds and things like that. And I think that's what I would recommend to Cabinet are accelerated.
Right. Sorry, would you?
I would suggest that we recommend to Cabinet that issues like the ownership structure and the fundraising are given the highest priority.
Okay. Right. Okay. Yeah. So it's about prioritising the items within the action plan. Yeah.
I would like to recommend that the carbon prioritisation needs to come up from 18 months because I'm sure somewhere I've seen a report saying the roof is not as wonderful as it ought to be. And the community centre that I happen to be involved in, we had the same report and we decided in the end to replace the roof and put PV cells in it as part and parcel of it and put a battery storage in. And that just turns quite a lot of the finances around because you're actually generating energy to run yourself rather than, yeah. And I think given put the climate emergency at the heart of everything, that should come up from 18 months.
Okay.
I think the boilers also, remember rightly, not good.
Yeah, I think it's quite striking that the date of 1998, since any large amount of work done it, was I was still at school in 1998.
But if we're going to have to replace things like that,
I wasn't.
Yeah. Any other thoughts or comments? Or Councillor Popolowski, thank you, Simon.
Yeah, I was just going to, similar to kind of what Judy was saying with regards to the structural side of the building, I think that needs to be looked at sooner rather than later because I'm not even sure it'd be suitable for sales, to be honest, thinking about the geographical location of where it is. So I think that needs to come up the scale because obviously if the works have to be done and there's maintenance issues and you can't get the decarbonisation that you need to, then that has ongoing impacts and costs as well. So I think there's that building side of things needs to come forward a little bit.
Thank you. Andrew.
Yeah, just on that point, members may have seen there was a list of seal projects what's identified. So we're concentrating on fire safety as a priority, which is to do the building fabric. There's also other works there, so take those comments on board, but it's been identified.
Yeah, thank you very much. So in terms of recommendations, we're going to ask Cabinet, I'm going to look at Candida as I said. The clear time parameters regarding the discussions with Hornsey Town Council. We would like, there's a lot in the action plan. We would like issues of ownership structure, fundraising, and carbon prioritisation, or carbon to be prioritised.
Yeah.
Decarbonisation. Yeah.
I think actually, sorry, Chair, what you're asking for is clear time parameters for the whole action plan.
Yeah.
And then out of that, you're asking Cabinet to consider what can be accelerated, particularly, and then the examples that you've given, which is for the discussion with Hornsey Town Council, progression of fundraising efforts, future commercial options, and reviewing timescales for decarbonisation work as your priorities to focus on.
Yes.
That makes sense, wrapping it rather than having like 5 different recommendations.
Yeah, so it's about accelerating and then the key ones you've just highlighted.
Yeah. Then you have got your second recommendation.
Yeah. And then the second the recommendation then is to revisit the consultation with local members specifically, if that can be, because I think it is really important to.
Just on that one, Chair, there is an action about reintroducing and introducing a community board. So that's within the action plan as well, but no the courts about local ward members.
Lovely. Any other? It's obviously a very difficult topic and one that's been going on a long time. So thank you for your work. Good luck. And thank you for sharing this report with us. Appreciate there's an enormous amount of work gone into it already and lots more to do. Thank you very much. Oh, sorry, I think we needed to vote on those recommendations, didn't we?
I propose.
We've done it all. Hands shown who's in favour of those. Yeah. Okay.
Thank you. Minutes will show that Scrutiny wanted to come back and come to me.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
Absolutely. Please.
Yeah, that's in there.
I was going to say, it can come in paper, can't it? Yeah. Doesn't have to be a full.
Yeah. An update on our tracker, which we will have. Item 10 on the agenda was a confidential discussion, which we established that we didn't feel was necessary. I think that's important that we were, fully as open as we could be. And with that, I think that's the end of our meeting this evening. Good night. Thanks to everybody.
And the chair's still standing. We're still sitting.
And I've got it up yet.
So yeah, thank you everybody.